What's up, guys? Welcome everyone to the FATED Connections Path of Exile Community Podcast, episode number 62. It's just been a couple of days since the last episode went live, but we're back here already with another banger. And today we got, of course, our regular BalorMage sitting right next to me, and we're joined by no other than MatLighty and BigDucks. Both big on the YouTubes, and you guys probably have seen them around before. But for those people who haven't, would you quickly give us an introduction and tell us what you're all about, since when you play the game, what mode you prefer, and so on? Lighty, how are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm pretty good. And how you guys doing?
Yes, you're pretty. I agree.
Thank you. I'm very handsome. My name is MatLighty, and I play Path of Exile, and I've been playing since the game existed. I've had various series over the times. Previously, I had a hardcore solo self-fun one before solo self-fun was even a thing. Then I did the Rags to Riches series, and now I'm on the All for One series, which I attempt to get every single unique in solo self-fun, which is the game mode I only play really, aside from like charity stuff and like private leagues. So pretty much that's all I play now is SSF.
Awesome. I mean, SSF is the way to go, right?
Yeah.
or not. What do you say, BigDucks?
SSF? I mean, there's a meme on my channel where I basically just say that people are allowed to have wrong opinions, and that's perfectly fine. But I play softcore trade. I am BigDucks. Typically, I make videos for newer players. I play pretty much exclusively softcore trade. I more so focus on YouTube probably than the Twitch thing, but maybe I've been streaming a little bit more recently. I also have been playing this game since I think I played a little bit in closed beta, but then like I quit for a while and came back in open beta because my account got deleted or something like that. But I've been playing for quite a while as well, and just recently in the last like probably year or two, I started making content for it because decided that I felt like there was an opening for very, very new players trying to transition into more experienced players, and that's kind of the niche that I tried to fill. But yeah, I mean, I play probably more so in the newer player perspective than maybe most other people do.
Have you always played softcore trade? Because I do remember you saying you actually played hardcore back in the day.
I played it out of necessity, I guess you could say, because back before, very, very early in Path of Exile, there were different leagues for softcore and hardcore, and most of the hardcore leagues early on were the cool ones, and that was where most of the community was, so I kind of felt like I was forced to play hardcore. Until we got to like Tempest. I think Tempest is where I swapped over to softcore, and then I stayed in softcore since then, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. No, I totally feel that. Valley, you wanted to say something?
Nah, just that I really like that you're allowed to have wrong opinions. Solo self-found.
Yeah.
Solo self-found to me is a really nice, fun challenge to do one character on occasionally here and there, but not at all a way to play the game. Horrible. I hate it. I like it for about a week, and then I'm like, okay, but now these 2C items would double the strength and fun that I'm having, and I can't get them. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass.
Yeah, my reasoning for not really liking solo self-found is mainly just that as my life has become more busy over time, I feel like I can't invest the amount of time it would take to be able to get the stuff I want to do in solo self-found, right? Because like I go through a new build probably every 3 or 4 days. Like I'm moving through another build, and I just can't do that on solo self, and it just doesn't work for me,
Yep.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. Like if you have a specific build in mind that you want to do, and and you trying to figure out a path how to get there in SSF, that usually doesn't work as smoothly as in trade, and especially if you're looking to make content, then this is the way better, more straightforward approach is to just buy the items in trade. Just for me, it's usually overwhelming the amount of options that I'd have in softcore trade, to the point where I'd get paralyzed by it and I'd not do anything. And SSF is great for me because it just allows me to put together build concepts or ideas for new characters in my stash with the stuff that I find, And then when I die, because I play mostly HC SSF, I can then directly roll the next character because, oh, I got this gear and that gear, and I wanted to try and put this together and see how far I can get on, just stuff that I found. But
very rarely am I ever limited by any factor in solo self-found. So for the reasons like that some of you guys are saying, whether it's unobtainable items or certain things, I mean, there's really no build you can't play in SSF when time is not a factor. But obviously, time is a factor for everybody, for at least some people. But like actually being able to build it, you could do it all. I mean, I've pretty much built everything in solo self-found, even up to like the higher tier of stacking builds that would be considered mirror like tier in trade league. So it's a combination of like game knowledge and time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know, like today I used 14 Maven orbs. Like I don't even know how you'd get 14 Maven orbs on your own. Like
kill Maven a bunch.
Lots and lots and lots of time.
It's like what, 1 in 20 to get a Maven orb?
1 in 8.
Is it? What is it? It feels like
1 awaken or 9. It's 1 in 8.
All right, so you need to kill him 112 times on average.
You can kill him one time and just not whiff the first Maven orb.
Yeah, just get lucky.
Oh, but they were all different pieces.
No, it's fine.
Sure.
So at least 5, because I did 5 different pieces. You could just succeed 5 times and only need 5.
Yeah,
that was
it happens. Yeah.
Yep. That's fair.
Yeah, I just feel if accessibility or just being able to access currency and gear just allows you to do a lot of setups that you wouldn't do in an SSF context. In SSF, you're just usually going for the most obvious and the most potent build concepts, I think. And in trade, you can pretty much make anything work if you just funnel enough currency into it. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, with SSF, you can obviously do anything. I mean, we've seen plenty of players in SSF be able to do things like int stacking and things like, builds that most people wouldn't even be able to play on, even on softcore trade. But if you, like Lighty said, if you have all of the knowledge that you need of where to farm the thing the most efficiently, you have the time. I mean, there's a lot of streamers that play SSF, probably just because it extends their amount of time that they can play the game, right? And if you're playing 16 hours a day, like some people, or even more than that if you're Zizaran, you're like, you're basically able to do whatever you want because you've traded some of the, you've traded some of your efficiency for time. Because you just have as much of it as you need.
That's fair. We've seen proper aura stackers and everything in solo self-found too. It's just it's just so much time. I don't even know if I have the amount of knowledge that would be needed for that.
It's a very different knowledge set, definitely.
Yeah. I'm here to answer questions if you need them, Balor.
Some of them are just some of the things where I'm just occasionally there's a hole in my knowledge where someone's like, how do you get this in solo self-found? And I'm like, I don't know. It's 1C. It's been hidden since day 1. I don't even know where it drops.
That's what chat is for.
People are like, where do you farm the Death's Oath div card? And I'm like, Death's Oath has a div card? I didn't even know the chest is worth 2 chaos. Why would I have div cards for it turned on? I don't know. This is solo self-found knowledge.
But you get that knowledge from playing solo self-found because it forces you to be in that situation, and then every situation that arises, you now learn one thing that you didn't learn, and that's what makes you gain more knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely feel that solo self-found players have a vast majority of the knowledge, whereas as a softcore trade player, I'm just like, all right, switch to my other monitor, Death's Oath, and then I buy it, and it's done, right? Whereas on solo self-found, you have to know, okay, well, Death's Oath, it's got, a divination card here, or maybe it's a specific draw from this area, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. It's like you have all that knowledge, but I just don't have the time.
But you don't know shit about pricing.
To be honest, pricing isn't that hard. A lot of people over-exaggerate how hard it is to price certain things. It's not that bad. I'm sure even someone from solo self-found could figure it out relatively quickly.
Well, oftentimes it's because they can't identify the key factors in an item, and then the the chaff of the item is getting in the way of their pricing. So if an item has 6 modifiers, they're trying to price something oftentimes that has 5 or 6 of the modifiers, but realistically, only 2 or 3 of them are the relevant ones. So
I think that's more a new player problem than an SSF player problem. I think SSF players are able to identify what's valuable about an item. But
a lot of people, when they misprice stuff, are also mispricing things based on like, this particular item has an open prefix and yours does not. And therefore it's worth 25x and yours is worth 2. Because there's an open prefix.
Sometimes that's the case, but oftentimes not. But, you know, it's also contextual. That's one of the more, I guess, staggering issues for pricing is that it can be very contextual to the build, the ebb and flow of the league, the time of day even. So, and also who's just purchasing things in the market. So it's a
also, if you're a streamer and people want to come and just randomly buy your stuff. I seem to remember in Diablo 3 back forever ago when Crip posted his hamburger unique for $250 and someone bought it. It's like, come on, dude. I always feel weird when I post some stuff to like sell and it sells a little bit too quickly because I just think that someone's just like coming in and trying to essentially donate by buying a random trash item for too much.
yeah, no, that's something that I enjoy personally about playing SSF as a streamer is I don't have to bother with that train of thought. I'm never worried that people are going to bro deal me or people are going to try and... there's also sometimes you get people who want to just party with you, want to aura bot for you, and I appreciate that and I accept that in Badger's private league, for example. Whenever I play a league in which I'm able to party or trade. But it's nice to be able to not have to deal with that in the sense of telling people off, or, like, telling people I don't want that, but you could just say, hey, I'm SSF, I don't have, like, we can't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I can't price your item. I don't know.
So, I mean, in any situation, like, again, same with you, often, like, we'll do maybe 1 or 2 private leagues or whatever event things. In those situations, I'll take any handout because it just doesn't fucking matter to me. Like, in that situation, I'm like, feed it off because I'm playing here for 1 week at most, and it's like, just let the floodgates open.
Yeah, here recently, I had a very strict policy of taking nothing for most of my streaming and whatever and content creation. I had just a strict policy: no help, no taking anything, no partying with anybody. And here recently, I feel like I have less time than I did before, and on top of that, I haven't really super enjoyed the recent changes, so I decided to just start taking donations of only currency at this point to be able to fund, because I probably have been spending 20 to 30 exalt every day or 2, maybe every 3 days now on just making another build, testing them, seeing all that's going on. So it's kind of weird. It's hard to stay in the mindset of like a new player, because that's what I try to do when people are funneling you hundreds of exalts randomly. So it's a little bit tough, but I'm attempting to.
Do you not turn a profit when you're making builds?
I don't sell the items. I don't sell any of the items. I look at my content creation like very business-like. So when I make a build, it stays intact, right? And I keep it because I might need it to make a video later or update something or whatever else it is, right? I never ever sell the items. They stay on the character.
Oh, mine are gone. When I did that 5 builds in a row, and I've only sold 3 of them so far, and I've made a profit of 112x.
It'd be easy if I just dismantled the character, right? Because they're just sitting with I have hundreds of exalts of items sitting on those characters. I could sell them, sure, but I try to keep the characters intact.
Does make sense from a content creation.
As soon as my videos are done, I'm character's gone. I'm like, I've got a path of building there. I've got that saved. I've done the video. I've got your clips. I've got your highlights. I've got some boss skills. Character's done. See ya. But to be honest, I'd probably stop doing that immediately if I changed to like taking handouts. I wouldn't bother selling them. Like, I'm only selling them so that I've got the money to keep making more.
Yeah, see, that was my thought process, right? I'm like, Well, I'm not taking things from people right now, and it's making it more difficult to show chat what they want to see, and more difficult for me because lifestyle creep has kind of like come in to where I have all of these other things that I'm trying to get done as well outside of streaming and stuff like that. So it's like, well, I could spend an extra 10 hours a week, getting stuff together and farming and doing all that other stuff, or chat can just be like, here, I'm done with the league, let's just get to the good stuff immediately. So
That's fair.
Yeah.
Lighty, do you keep your old characters around? Oh yeah, please throw that in.
I mostly strip them. Any character that gets transferred to solo stuff on standard that's under 95, I just delete anyway. But if they have a unique that I need for the stash for like my completion progression, I'll strip that off them. And then most times I just rip them naked because I keep everything very organized. Like all my stashes are labeled and things are in the right spots, etc. So no, I rip them the second they're done. If in League, I'll maybe take bits and pieces, but at the moment I have 11 characters in Expedition Solo Self-Found, so a lot of them have just like fragments of gear.
I think super happy to take stuff from people and have that save me a bunch of time if it wasn't for the fact that I think a large majority of my content that I put out is based around you don't need a bunch of time to be rich and make expensive builds. What you need is knowledge, and here is how you can do it. And here are all the different ways with all your different amounts of playtime, and I will walk you through it and I will hold your hand. But I think I lose credibility if I start taking money from people. Like, I don't think handouts are bad, but I do think if you're going to market yourself as, I will teach you how to make currency, then you can't take handouts.
It undermines your narrative if that was the case.
Yeah.
I think that you can do it both ways, right? I think that you just need to probably explain yourself properly, right? Like, it needs to be something obvious, right? And you don't have to bring it up in every single video, but I think you could probably manage it if you wanted to. I mean, I know that it kind of says, oh, well, this guy just takes handouts. That's how he makes so much currency. Well, just be more specific with the numbers and everything, right? Like, say I have a separate currency tab here, and I have these items, and these are what dropped. You can go check the VOD over my Twitch stream, and then you plug your Twitch stream, and then you go from there, You're like, I didn't take any handouts during this, and,
In the end, does it undermine your narrative more if you take 100x handouts than if you sell off the gear from the previous character and get 100x like that? I mean, that's the same thing for the new build,
even
right?
like-
You're just pulling 100x out of nowhere that the new player that compares to you doesn't have.
There's even like a simpler, in my opinion, solution to this, which is when I used to make crafting videos, I would just say at the beginning of the video, like oftentimes or during the stream, this was funded by this person. He gave here's 3 mirrors he gave to crafting this item. Like, this is where this shit came from. This is where it's going. It's probably all going to be destroyed in the process, but this is who like backed it. You could do something similar realistically. If you're like, this person gave me 15x to make this build, and then this would have taken X amount of time to farm, yada yada, just to fast track the whole process.
I mean,
Or you could just not say shit because really, if you didn't mention it, that now or before, no one would know the difference.
Yeah, I mean, like, most people if you're posting a YouTube video, like, sorry to YouTube commenter persons, but it is like one of the deepest pits of hell is the YouTube comment section. So I mean, sometimes you just gotta ignore it. I mean, let them complain. They can do what they want,
Do you read your comments?
Occasionally, it depends. I have this like weird love-hate relationship with YouTube comments because I try to actively take feedback all the time and incorporate it into like my like, what I do and all that kind of stuff. I also like to make sure that I give the most complete information that I can. So I'll go into the comments sometime, and if some people are spamming some like just straight wrong shit, I won't delete it. I'll like respond to them and try to explain, like my thought process or what I think is correct or something like that. I've tried really hard to not just be one of those people who just deletes all YouTube comments, and I know I'm making more work for myself in that regard, but I've tried to be one of those people who just attempts to teach instead of just like deleting all the bad shit, right? Because that'd be way easier. It'd be way easier. It'd take me 5 minutes, and I could just be like, well, this guy's being an idiot, this guy's lying, this guy's being stupid, just delete, but I at least try to, respond and stuff like that.
I tried a bunch of times to just turn off notifications and just never go check it. and that never lasts more than about a day and a half. It's like a
tough.
day and a half later, and I'm like, I have to go see what people are saying.
Yeah. It can be tough. Eventually, I just got to the point where I genuinely didn't really care anymore. You know, like at first, I think this happens with anything, right? Like as you start to get like more and more like time spent as a content creator, I think it starts to affect you less, right? Like you get people coming in and they'll say dumb shit, and at the start, you know, you don't know how to handle it, and you're just kind of like, oh, why is this person attacking me? I don't understand. And then as you go through, it's just like, well, it's just some random upset dude, and he's just lashing out because you're the person that's in front of him, right? It's like, it just doesn't bother me anymore.
Cannot relate. I've never had any of these problems before. Over all the years.
Do you read your comments or do you just skip them
every
or
video.
not care?
Read every video. Just never
It's
had
the
any
style
issues.
of content. The style of content that you do is more. I think we talked about this the other day, right? Where like the style of content that you do it's like a slower build up, but it gives you like a better quality payoff, I guess. When you do like straight informative style content, you just get randos just constantly.
It's a lot
like
less
half of the
subjective
people are
what I
randos.
do. So like what you do is like not that people are fact checking it, but there could be like there is in a way a right or wrong, but kind of my videos is just like it just is. So it's not like it's not really up to subjection. It's just because the people who are watching it already like it. So there's really never a situation that you know anything ever bad happens, either stream or YouTube.
A different world.
Yeah, I can't really say it impacts me a lot anymore, but I am still always curious to see what people write. It's just and sometimes people have really value advice in the comments or even say things where you're like, okay, I didn't think about it like that. So it's I think it's always helpful to at least have somewhat of an awareness what people say. But it's also funny with the podcast, like for example with the podcast, because you always have to take it with a grain of salt. You always have like Balor and myself, we're pretty different in our regards to how we talk about the game, how we think about the game, how we play the game. And then we have like diverse guests with different backgrounds. And there's always like, you can literally on every podcast episode, there's at least one comment that hates at least on one person of like, for every person on the podcast, there's at least one hater in the comments where you're like, oh, that guy, I can't stand that guy. It's like, or I can't stand
I hate
that
this
lady.
BigDucks guy. Why is he on the stream?
Yeah, almost every guest too. There'll be someone. There'll be at least one person being like, I just never seen this person before, and I just absolutely hate them.
Yeah,
Shit takes
like,
everywhere.
Yeah, that guy just doesn't stop talking. Oh, that guy just never talks. And it's like, what do you want? Do you want people who hold back or want people who take the space? It's and in the same way, like you can't please everyone. Just like you said, BigDucks, when you like, I guess when you're casting a wide net, when you make content that really caters to a lot of people, then there's always all ends of the spectrum. Similar to how Path of Exile's development, right? They're just trying to cater to so many people that there's always, you know, people on the one end of the spectrum who's saying you're not doing enough, people on the other end of the spectrum, you're doing too much. And it's really rough. To get back a little bit to the Path of Exile topic, you already mentioned that years ago, Path of Exile leagues were different for hardcore and softcore, and I think we all played at that point already, because that was up to Talisman League, I believe. I think the league before Talisman was the last one where we had separate leagues, and then after Talisman was Pirandas, I think? Something like that. And that's when they started doing the exact same league for everything. What do you prefer? Did you prefer the times when they did different leagues? Or do you prefer the unified league concept for both softcore and hardcore?
As long as the game's good, I really don't give a shit.
I mean, my thought process on it was that I kind of had this like, it felt like I was kind of like FOMOing, right? Like it felt like I was missing something if I didn't try to at least play both, right?
Yeah.
And way back in the day, I played hardcore because that's where people were, right? Like I originally got introduced to Path of Exile because of Kriparian, right? He was the one that, like, I had watched him play D3, and then he talked about this Path of Exile game, so I got into, like, you know, the early whatever beta, and then I started playing that. And the problem that I ran into is, like, everyone that played back then was much more hardcore, so they played on hardcore, right? That's just where people played. And I was playing like here, I think I have the list up. It was like there was like Onslaught and Anarchy. Onslaught was kind of a meme, to be honest with you. It's just like, yeah, everything moves faster.
Yep.
And then we had like Nemesis and Domination, Ambush and Invasion, and like the hardcore leagues seemed more cool. They had the more interesting stuff to them, right? So I played mainly hardcore.
Just a fact, they were just better. Like,
Yeah,
it's not even up to context.
Like I feel like as time moved on, it was the obvious conclusion, right? It allowed them to make a better game. It allowed them to like spend their resources on one thing and make one really good thing versus two maybe sort of okay things, you know? Or rather one okay thing and one kind of whatever thing. So yeah, I think I like the new way.
You could really, if you really want to break it down to like modern times, you can kind of extrapolate that same thing, and it could basically be happening now, but just over the course of 6 months. It's like, what I mean by that is, instead of having 2 leagues simultaneously at 3 months and one's good, one's shit, now they're just releasing 2 leagues back to back and one's good, one's shit, and it could have been the exact same time frame. But so like if you have a league like Ultimatum and Ritual back to back, like Ritual would have been hardcore and Ultimatum would have been softcore, and that could have been what that timeline was. But now it's just, you know, stretched thinner.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Same, but different.
I feel like back, it's hard to say because the scope of leagues has grown so much. I mean, like back then, what was the league? Even in times like after Pirandas, I mean, I think Prophecy was after Pirandas still, right? Prophecy was basically just Navali and then getting 1 silver coin in every area. And that would barely pass as a league nowadays. I mean, people would be pretty upset if that.
The context at the time, though, is really what matters. I mean, it's all viewed to the scope of then, and it totally changes it. Because even things like Anarchy, like we named now, is really just like a showcase for MTX that gets wiped in 1 second off the screen.
Yeah.
At the time, it was like, holy shit, it's a new game. Here comes Xandro, Blood Drinker, to fucking eat my ass across the map. And that just doesn't happen anymore, you know? But simplicity can be effective. It just
you get those
doesn't
rogue
seem to be the
exiles
case now. Yeah.
that do you guys notice there's like 3 or 4 rogue exiles that when you kill them, you get that like shell shocked sound in your ear, like you're getting like tinnitus or something. I don't know which one of it is, but you kill one of them and like the sound just fades out for a second. I don't even know if you guys play with game sound, but there's at least a couple of them.
There's a litany of audio bugs in Path, so I just chalk it up to this is just some sound driver issue half the time.
Yeah,
it was like the silo boss for me for over like 8 months. Would just since it basically came out to when it last patch, the silo boss would be 100 decibels higher than everything else in the game. It would blow my fucking speakers out, and I don't know why.
The new Hail Rake.
God.
Boss and
actually,
yeah,
screams, and it's so loud.
Yeah, also so high frequent.
For me.
In comparison, everything else sounds muffled, but that one's so clear in the high end spectrum. Oh man!
I don't. Yeah, for me, every time I do Act 1, Brutus is just yelling "come at me" nonstop, and it's like so loud versus everything else. I don't know why. That's also like a fever dream in itself. Brutus just yelling "come at me," but
yeah.
But yeah, leaks have come a long way, and that's what I mean. Like, there's just 2 factors. The one is like the scope of the league has exploded, but then also back in the day, I feel like softcore leagues were usually trying to give you extra rewards, whereas hardcore leagues were usually trying to make you die harder and more often, as opposed to having the loot pinata. And I kind of like that they combined it both. That they're making some leagues that are more heavy on actual extra challenge and some leagues that are more heavy on extra rewards. But usually leagues nowadays combine both factors. What I really miss about leagues, though, personally, is a league significantly changing the way that you play the game outside of, like, reward incentive. Sure, Expedition is different when you interact with the encounter and you want to interact with the encounter because it's super rewarding. But if you didn't, then you'd be basically playing a vanilla league. Whereas something like Betrayal forced you to think differently about how you roll your maps, how you do certain things at certain points in time.
Yeah, we touched upon this a little bit, but previously, but it was like any league that gives you the option of interaction inherently is kind of shit because you could just choose not to. Now you're playing vanilla path, which is fine, but every league that basically forces itself upon you tends to be better throughout history. So another like a scenario where like this was very well received was Invasion, because you would enter zone and there's gonna be an invasion boss. You will encounter it, and that interaction will have to occur. And then you had something like Essence, which was if you just didn't click the Essence, you're now playing vanilla path, and that's all fine and well. But why be in league outside of economy reset if this is the case? So it's just strange that they give you the option of forced interaction versus not. I mean, it's almost as if it's catering towards an easier crowd because it's like, well, for the people that want training wheels, here is that. Yeah, it's a weird directional shift, kind of.
Well, it's important to point out here that while I agree with you, that's like one is straight up better than the other. There are people who do prefer to trigger the interaction and to be able to avoid it.
I've actually never thought about it in that regard before, the whole like forced interaction versus choice interaction, but I actually do have to agree with you, Lighty. I've noticed that as time has gone on, whenever I go into a league, it's the longevity of the league that lasts when you're forced to deal with the mechanic all the time, right? It makes it feel like there's more going on, because even right now, I'm pretty bored of Expedition, right? Like it just feels like with everything that I'm trying to get done, it almost feels like an extra chore, and it has felt like that for quite a while now. So the idea of like a league where it's just always right there in your face, or maybe you don't have to do very much, like the barrier of entry, like Delirium was just like, oh, you just run through the mirror, right?
Yep.
Whereas with Expedition, it's like, all right, well, I got to dedicate a minute or maybe a minute and a half to figuring out where I'm going to put all the different things, and I messed it up and I got to go back and do it this way, you know? Maybe they probably should work on making the barrier to entry a lot lower on
Expedition definitely is for me. It's still like A to S tier league for a variety of reasons we can get into later, but it definitely is, as far as an interactive mechanic, super fucking slow because by definition, I mean, if you're trying to optimize the mechanic, you're analyzing like a couple of factors. Even in a logbook, it's like, is there a boss? Now I have to plot to effectively increase the quantity rarity without making it too hard. If there's not, now I'm searching the entire logbook for the word duplicate. If there's not that, now I'm looking for specific stackings of quantity. And this whole process is just like 15 minutes of setup. And if you were to play a couple hours a night, it's like there's a huge chunk of your night just fiddling, which is kind of what people want to do maybe before they play, and then just play. So for that regard, it's definitely slow. But the rewards do, on the back end, kind of pay off at least.
See, at least in maps, I started enjoying Expedition a lot more as soon as I stopped worrying about trying to plan good stuff. Now I just know what immunity I can't take, and I will read yellow text, and that's it. I will just aim for skulls and get as many boxes that are nearby skulls as I can, and then planting the entire thing takes me, I don't know, like 8 seconds, and I just hit go.
Problem with that, though, is
I'm being inefficient, right? Like I'm losing money.
Sure. There's actually a couple build stopping things that aren't yellow. That's also a problem. So can't be crit, 20% coal. There's certain things that actually can just give a build totally and make it do nothing that aren't yellow. So it's kind of like a slight fuck you there to like a lot of the player base. Because COC, any low life build, if you do no crit or you do low life, you just got one shot. So now you have to read, if you're playing this build, there's an extra burden on you.
One of my builds was cast on crit just recently, and I only played it for 3 days, and I must have ran away from like, I don't know, 15 different maps, because I was like, I just quickly read the yellow ones, hit the thing, you get halfway through it, and you just stop critting. And you're like, the whole build doesn't work.
Yep.
Yeah,
like,
I think
why isn't that no extra damage from crits or something like that?
Terrible design choice. Like,
I think they should have done something better. I talked about that like right as soon as the league released. I'm like, why are there so few mods that are very dangerous that are not highlighted, right? Because it bricks other builds too, not just like, oh, well, you can't deal physical damage to them. It's like, well, like you said, if you're a crit build and you can't crit, like they just aren't able to be crit, you're just screwed.
Oh, I think
Yeah, it's
that's
just
somewhat compensated for by the fact that it's like an optional league mechanic. It's like an opt-in mechanic. You're not getting presented with an encounter that you cannot solve. It's like you make the encounter that you cannot solve.
Yeah,
and the
but I
burden's on the
always
player, but that's never existed
yeah.
before, where there was an optional mechanic that you could like by virtue of not paying fully attention, totally negate your interaction. I mean, they could have very easily just said 75% less damage, but they chose to do 100, and
It
that's
has
like
existed.
in what scenario previously could you
It's
act
on
like
your map right now. You can just put a reflect map in and die. You can be a righteous fire character, just put in a cannot regen map because you didn't read and just die. Right?
You can work around that for most builds though, and they've removed the ones that are kind of like whatever. I think the problem is more so like just that on average when it comes to Path of Exile, people are going to just it's what that one developer said. I don't remember what game it was from, but people are always going to follow the path of least resistance, so the path of least resistance needs to be fun is the problem. So people are always just going to be like even you, Balor, you had said that, oh yeah, I just go in there and go boom 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 and I'm done, right? And you're like, I look at the yellow things and I see what's good, and then I hit it and like, oh shit, I can't do this map anymore. I think they could have maybe done a little bit better on like communicating the more difficult mods. Like set them into tiers and then color them, right? So like red probably should have been the color for dangerous mods and maybe yellow for some less dangerous ones. And then like blue for the just like, oh yeah, they or something like that.
Yeah. It could have been done a lot better.
Communication of it.
That I don't know how hard this would be, but the one thing PoE does the very, 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 very worst of any game I've ever played is the ability to customize.
Yeah.
I can customize my character, but I can't customize my game at all. And this was like a perfect example of when the ability to customize would have been great. Like if there was some UI somewhere
for content.
yeah. But if there was some UI somewhere where I could see all the mods that Expedition has and decide what color I want them to be on that character,
yeah,
suddenly the league mechanic goes from being like a 6 to like a 10 for me. Like if I can just color them so I don't have to read text lines this long in the middle of my map, and I can just be like, this is the mod I can't run, this is the mod I can't run, and then these mods, if I stack 3 of them, that'll be a problem, so I'll put them in like a lighter color so that I can just know if I'm hitting a few of those, I better pay attention, and then I can just stop worrying about it.
I think it's like a two-pronged issue. On one side, unfortunately, and I think we're going to talk about this later with Chris. Unfortunately, when Chris speaks, I don't know what the other devs are thinking, but he said many times that they want Path of Exile to look a very specific way, so it's super recognizable to just a random person looking at it. So they're like unwilling to change pieces of the interface and let them be like modular, right? I've always wanted the interface to just be modular as hell, right? I think that Path of Exile looks iconic just even if you took out all the interface, right? Leave the girls down at the bottom left, whatever, bottom left and right, who cares? You can have them there, but like, I feel like I would really like something like, I don't know, like weak auras for Path of Exile, but he said 100% they're not going to do it.
I feel like any leg to stand on for that argument was kind of gone out the window when you walk into town and see 15 people glowing like the fucking sun, wearing like clown costumes and dragons and shit. That's gone.
Yeah.
Like any sort of respect I had for his vision of clarity when it comes to looking like a dark ARPG is out the window when we have just like K-pop groups walking around in Rayclast. So I don't think that is really fair to say anymore.
I mean, I agree. The second part of the issue is probably it's probably a business problem, right? It's like they're already biting off so much, and it's obvious that they're biting off so much. And I mean, I know that the meme right now is that, PoE 2 will fix it. Like, it's just is we'll get it fixed later, but it just feels like there is this top level of polish that just doesn't happen, right? Because I don't know if you guys have worked in like dev scenarios and like teams where things are being like created and stuff like that. But there's just this voice at the top that's always just like, okay, I see that's a problem, but can we launch? I see that's a problem, but can we launch it? Like, is it ready to launch? Are we good to go? Can we launch? And it just feels like that's what's happening, right? Is like, there's all these little problems that are obviously we could fix it, but there's just no time.
Just hold on till Path 2. That is the mentality. It's like we're all in a room. Chris is holding all our hands, and it's like, I swear, guys, this time for real. Just hold on till Path 2, and that's kind of the vibe for and really just until I guess 2023 or whenever the Path 2 decides to come out. But yeah,
Not before 2024.
I tell you what,
we'll see.
the amount of pressure they're putting on PoE 2,
Oh, it's insane.
even if they fix it within a few months, if it doesn't come out fantastic, I'm real worried.
I don't think they could do anything to mess up given the state of ARPGs at the moment, realistically. Especially in lieu of current Blizzard things. They could kind of shit the bed for a month or two, I think, and it would still make a negligible
With
difference.
PoE 2 even? Probably,
Yeah.
yeah, but they don't want that because they've... And
Well,
I think
obviously.
they don't have to because they didn't put a date on PoE 2 and they're not going to until it's done, I think.
I also feel like, what if they kill ARPGs by just like, if Path of Exile falls right now, what's left? Last Epoch? I mean, we got mods for Diablo 2. Grim Dawn hasn't been updated for a while. I mean, saying ARPG isn't really fair. It's like looter, like dungeon crawler ARPGs, right? Like, what's left if Path of Exile falls? You know,
Like
Roblox.
Epoch is really good, but
it's not
it's
there.
really good for a beta game that's
Yeah.
not had a decade to develop yet. Like it's fantastic and it shows promise, but it's not a game that can take a few thousand hours right now.
I mean, I'm still very much in the camp that it would take concentrated effort for more than a year for Path of Exile to fuck up. Like, they would have to do everything wrong for a very long period of time for them not to bounce back or still be the best version of the genre at the moment. That's
I agree with
stance.
you. They have essentially no competition, right? Like, let's be realistic. Last Epoch, like Balor said, it looks promising for what it is, but it's not a game that you can like get into, right? It's like I feel like there was this big exodus of people, and we see this a lot. Like, the very Path of Exile seems to be that game that like very, very hardcore minded individuals like just get like lured into, right? Like, all of the hardcore WoW raiders ended up in Path of Exile. That's where I ended up. Like, people who are like, there's so many pro League of Legends players that also play Path of Exile. It's insane. People who just want hundreds of hours to be able to dump into something find themselves in Path of Exile, and there's nothing else for them right now. So I can kind of see that, they could pretty much do whatever they want right now.
And
But
for a new game to surmount the backlog of content Path has would take such effort that I don't think it's possible realistically.
yeah, the
It
same
is
thing
over
happened with
time.
Blizzard. Like, I think it
Again,
would
over
take
time,
like,
if Path did nothing, and so Path did nothing for 2 years, and someone else
Yeah.
did everything right for 2 years, then sure. But then
I think
even
it would
then,
take, like,
we wouldn't
Blizzard
complain
level
because
of
we'd have the
fucking
new
up.
thing. Like, it'd be fine. We just whatever the new thing would be, that'd be better. We just go play that. But I just don't think that's the case.
Could you
I don't know.
repeat
I
what-
actually hold a lot of promise for Last Epoch. Like 5 years after it launches, I'm pretty sure by then it'll be a real competitor. We will have two really good games. But it'll be after it launches and then 5 years or so of development afterwards before it's able to compete.
That's like the guy in the street corner with the sign that says "The end is near." I mean, if we're banking on games 5 years from now, it's like this is just Duke Nukem all over again. I mean, it's just gonna happen.
I think
So much
5
happens in
years.
5 years, man.
5 years is a little bit of a high estimate. I think like 3 years should be fine. But, it really depends on how much happens on Path of Exile or on other games in the meantime. I mean, there could be like a super new mind-blowing concept. I mean, I don't know how much we've seen of PoE 2, for example, right? Like, I mean, how much
Very
new
little.
genre-defining stuff are we gonna get? We know very little about PoE 2, I think.
I mean, that doesn't happen really, though. Just like nothing comes out and is like, this changes everything. I mean, even when Path came out, it was horseshit when it first came out. And it's just been slowly getting better over time to like a really, really good state of huge backlog of content. But even when it came out, it was like, wow, this is really, really cool. But like, there's nothing. You had Maelstrom of Chaos, which was just pre-map, and then you had to farm like chests in the graveyard, and that was it. Like, so even the original versions of Path was pretty jank. It's just that for the people who've been there from the beginning or people who've come later on, they like sometimes they give the impression that like when it hit the scene, it was like Path of Exile. This is the game changer. But it really wasn't the case. It slowly just got better.
Yeah, I think that Path of Exile, hopefully, as long as Path of Exile 2 ends up being okay, I think we will be fine regardless, right? Like you said, I think it would take a lot, like a serious concerted effort to destroy Path of Exile, which I could question whether or not that they've tried to do that in the past and even somewhat recently, but it would take a very, very concerted effort or complete lack of effort for a long time for us to completely fall off, right? We lost like what, 30%, they said? Like 30% revenue is what they said, which is probably roughly it's probably more of the player base, since I'm sure a lot of their revenue is from whales. I don't know how many whales they would lose because those people don't really leave very often. But from what someone in my chat the other day was saying, that league retention right now is better than it was in Ultimatum from a percentage wise. But I haven't
Also
looked
Harvest.
into the numbers. Yeah,
Ultimatum
Like-
and Harvest from percent wises were better than this. Were worse than this league.
Also,
but
a
I don't know
timescale
what
thing,
the
though.
say again.
It's also a time thing. Like saying that it's kind of hard to say that Path lost 30% of its player base, or whatever the number may be.
Mhm.
But that's only in the scope of a 3 to 6 month period. Though, if you were to draw that out, realistically, they could have lost what amount of players, and those players will eventually often cycle back. Like it's hard to track permanent loss of players.
Mm-hmm.
You can't like say for a fact, oh, like Jim stopped playing, and then he stopped playing for this league, and then next league he could be back. Like Path players often are quite cyclical in their players, and sometimes they'll take leagues off and return, or you get new players in that time span. So
I do worry. Sorry, I've talked a lot. Go ahead.
No,
I was just saying,
I want
I think
to know.
Almost everyone comes back, seemingly, that I can tell. I've known people who have skipped 2 or 3 leagues, but I've not known anyone that's quit and not come back.
even for like a week or so, like I had the same situation. I don't really know anyone who's quit Path that has played for like a year and has never come back to at least play a character or 2.
Yeah, I think that one problem maybe that happened here recently is that I think that's true for the more hardcore players, right? Like the people who make it past the great filter, right, of like getting into maps and experiencing the real game. The people who make it through there, I think they'll always eventually come back when there's something new, right? Because, I mean, why not? You know, there's not like a bajillion great games coming out right now in this genre, right? So I worry that the direction that they're kind of taking with the new player experience might be killing some of their like actual growth of new players coming in. Because I think for us, right, I don't think any of us had like significant problems with the game in 3.15, right? Like, yeah, Act 1 was a little weird, but I don't think any of us had any significant problems, right?
Just
Like
movement skills for me. That's it.
Yeah,
That was annoying.
like I didn't like the movement skill changes, and it wasn't too big of a deal. But my chat was blowing up with people being upset about Act 1 and Act 2, like the difference between them, like early on. And I had a couple prominent community members just quit, and they haven't come back, right? Like they quit like day 1, and they just didn't like it. I'm hoping that those people eventually come back, right? I'm worried that they kind of are setting themselves up for failure here when they spend 75% of the announcement saying, hey, we're nerfing everything and it's gonna suck, but it's okay. You know, it's like, I don't know that they should have, and I hope going forward they don't market it like that anymore. Just shove it under the rug or something, because you're just scaring people off.
I can't even put myself in the shoes of someone who would play Act 1 and think it's too hard that it's merit quitting the game. Like
It's difficult, right?
It's not even within the wheelhouse of my mind to like pull it off. That just
Yeah,
it's at most it was like Act 1 for me was like, oh look, Brutus is in a new spot. Okay, moving on. Like that was the end of the thought. I mean, I maybe added a minute to my Act 1 time, but yeah.
Is it just me, or like after having played for a while, I feel like Brutus is easier than he was before now.
He's definitely easier because you can kite him around a bench that just sits in the middle.
Yeah, you can do a lot more kiting. The only problem is obviously he doesn't spawn ads, so if the fight takes really long, you don't get flash charges, and you don't get to resummon zombies, which could be a problem for new players who like that archetype. And we're like, oh yeah, let me play zombies. And then you can't really sustain your zombies on Brutus, but they're also not tanky enough to survive.
That's a problem in and of itself. I think that there's lots of... I worry that in the Path of Exile dev team, there's like holes in the play style. Like Like I remember in WoW for the longest time, shamans basically were just completely unrepresented except for Resto because there was just no one on the dev team for WoW that even cared about shamans,
A
right?
lot
Like
of
there was
years,
just no one there.
There's been a few
And-
years where Shaman was terrible.
Yeah, and it's just there was just no one on the dev team who cared about shamans, right? I feel like there's some holes in the dev team for PoE because you can see the skills that get love and you can see the skills that get meaningful updates and the styles of play that get those updates, but there's other ones that just seem like they're just left on the wayside, you know?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that extends to like a lot of things in Path, though, and that could really honestly even be attributed to just the work environment and the hiring practices, which is, again, slightly constrained because of where they are, you know? They can't fully hire from the exterior pool, so it might be like a mindset type thing even in a way.
Yeah, it could absolutely, especially because New Zealand is one of the most aggressive lockdown like countries. I'm pretty sure, right? Like they just go into full like 100% just close off everything whenever any of the corona stuff happens, right?
And you were mentioning earlier from like a development team perspective. Like I could tell you from like a higher corporate management perspective, managing a team of people, even 40, 50 people up to 200 working remotely, if that's the case, is a shit show. So I'm sure just communication in itself is probably at the wayside often.
Yeah, for sure.
With the regards to people quitting and coming back, I wanted to mention that. I think I mentioned that on the other podcast though already, but like it was one of my favorite moments of all League was when one of my regulars came back and subscribed like 1 month into the league or 6 weeks or so, and was like, I was really upset about the changes for quit first week, and then I realized I don't really like any other games. So what's good starter builds?
Yeah.
I've had a few people like that
That's
too.
That's the vocal minority right there, pretty much.
Yeah. I've had a few people like that who've been like, I quit and then I tried to play a bunch of other things. Nothing entertained me for more than 2 days. So here we are. What do I league start as?
Yeah.
And good for them. By a month in, we had all of the lists. It's like, well, you want a league start and you're in softcore trade, just play off our totems. You know, you're good. Just play that and you're fine.
You can do this build or this build or this build. These are their strengths. We figured everything out already. Come back, have fun.
And half the changes that made you quit were already reverted.
Or realistically, like it's a weird mindset that they thought. Some people think that if there's 20 negative changes objectively, that somehow all 20 will affect you. But realistically, it's like 1 or 2 will affect each build, and then you're gonna play and you realize, all right, this was like a negligible difference compared to last league. Because that's really what it boils down to. It's just if you're playing a build catered to the content or not affected by it, it barely affects you, and that's just a choice by you as the player.
And they fixed most of the ones that were like egregious, right? Like I feel like they fixed like some of the mana changes, which didn't make very much sense to me. It's like, hey, let's make the blind support be more expensive. It's like okay, but you know, I still think they have some work to do on flasks. I really hope that this new like proactive reactive thing that they're going to try to do with flasks, I really, really hope that pans out, because flasks right now are still disgustingly powerful. They're still ridiculously powerful, but they just feel more annoying now. They don't feel different. They just feel more annoying is all it feels.
I actually disagree wholeheartedly in that I think flasks definitely got worse, and they're more streamlined for how I play. And what I mean by that is I'll really only, instead of pianoing 5 flasks, I only have to click 1 button now, because my other 4 flasks are set up to trigger one adjacent or hitting uniques. And for me, I have 3 or 4 offensive flasks, then I have overflowing chalice, and I'll have a movement flask or life flask. And it really just means I'm doing less clicking and more playing path, which is all I want to do is click less and grind more. So for me, it's been the total opposite effect.
Damn, you got to be pretty sad with Path of Exile then if you just want to click less and grind more, because
most of the builds I'm playing are 2 to 3 buttons at most, including flasks now. So
they want you to click all the time, man.
See,
they can want what they want, but we can do what we want. You know, that's Path of Exile. It's highly modular. So
yeah, I love the flask changes for just that reason. I don't press them anymore.
Yep.
Like I don't. I have a think about whether I want it to go off automatically when full, or whether I want it to go off when I use a guard skill, or whether I want it to go off when adjacent, or when I hit a rare or unique, or whatever. Right? Like I have a think about what's the best for that flask. In like 90% of cases, it's just go off when full, unless it's something like a bottled faith, which just won't have enough uptime for that. Otherwise, I just throw it on everything and never think about flasks again. It's great.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just though the thing about it is like if they did essentially just remove you using them, is that like because I don't know about you guys, but when I initially went to PoE, one of the things that I was like, oh, that's really cool, was the flask system. And it just feels like flasks have turned into, well, you either have them auto pop all the time or you smack your keyboard. And those are the two ways that you play it. Unless you're in like hardcore and then you can actually like interact with your flasks in some way. But it just feels kind of boring.
Before we had one option, now we've got two.
Yeah,
Before
I
it was
mean, it's like either slap or just don't press at all now. I mean, I get it, but it's just like that just doesn't feel like I don't know.
Interactive heyday of flasks, what would have been probably the earliest stages of flasks, because they mattered so much more when there was just nothing as far as tools to use. Even then, I just slapped my keyboard, and it didn't really fucking make a difference, because it was kind of like, well, if I got hit by something and my life pool went down, I'm hitting all 5 flasks. Like, it's just, no matter what happens, I've been hit, slap flasks, you know? Yep. It kind of happened as a background process, not so much an active choice.
I just slap my flasks like mad, with no matter whether I'm hit or not. And just bam, 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 FlaskMasterOP.
Yep.
I hope we get something with the like reactive proactive thing, because I would be fine with having flash just be like a random buff. Actually what they can be right now, right? It's just like, well, they pop whenever the things happen, but I'd like some level of interactivity there, right? Because with the fact that, you know, you just slap your flask whenever something bad happens, for builds that can't easily get, say, like freeze or chill immunity or ignite immunity or whatever immunity, right? You can set your flask to just auto pop on that, but then that kind of limits the space of what it is. So hopefully with the changes, I guess, to the Pantheon that they're doing, right? Like they're making it so that there's going to be freeze or chill immunity in Pantheons and like all the different ailment immunities and stuff. Hopefully we get something. I don't know. I'm not super happy with two options, I guess. I want like at least some interactivity from the flasks.
No, I agree.
I kind of.
Oh, please, Balor, go first.
I was just going to say, I kind of just don't want ailment immunities to be on flasks at all.
Yeah, I mean...
I'd just remove them entirely.
It did feel like there was this huge glaring problem that flasks were like a bandage for, that then they just ripped the band-aid off, and then now there's like, yeah, you could put a couple more points in the tree and get like ailment avoidance or less effective ailments and stuff like that, but that's not really a fun way to deal with it, I don't feel. It's like, oh yes, well, we nerfed flask and you lost 8 points on your skill tree, have fun. I want more choices, you know, like I want to be able to do extra stuff, like making the Pantheon actually useful seems pretty cool, but if they could give us more options for doing stuff, instead of it just being like, all right, well, you just hit your keyboard. You're done. All right, there's all your immunities. You know, it's like, and now they're not even immunities. It's reactive that you have to do it.
It's just very low on the totem pole for my priorities as far as what I care about in Path. I think is the thing now. Given what they were changed to, I'm okay with that enough that I would like the other 20 things I'd like looked at to be looked at over flasks at the moment.
I'm not just okay with it. I have to say that with the flask changes, let's divide it into 3 aspects. I think 2 of them are nailed, right? Like, I think the overall power of flasks was too much that we got. They nerfed all flasks. Great, good change. Then the overall uptime of flasks was too much. They nerfed how many flask charges we get. Great change. Right? There's more of an opportunity cost. You now sometimes have the flask not up while farming, unless you're a super fast build, your softcore blaster with investment into it and stuff like that. Sure, you'll have them up all the time. And you can actually build into that. You can get increased flask charges gained. You can play one of the ascendancies that's close to the nodes on the trees and stuff like that. But yeah, the big problem is the ailment stuff. Like you said, Ducks, the ailment stuff on flasks was a band-aid fix for builds that didn't have good access to avoid ailments, and taking that away from the flasks or making it worse. Sure, now we get 4 seconds of immunity. In some cases, it's actually a buff, which I also like. Like my life flask, for example, if I have freeze immune or bleed immune on the life flask. Actually, bleed is not a good example, but it doesn't only punctually remove it when I use the instant flask, but it gives me an immunity regardless of the fact that the instant flask doesn't have a flask duration, which is actually a buff. But I never really liked immunities being on flasks and you just having them all the time. I think elemental ailments, outside of maybe freeze, are interesting enough to actually have them in the game and to have to play around being affected by them in some way. And when you just talked about the Pantheons, I thought about all the skills that they added interactions with ailments to, right? The freeze immunity to Arctic armor and stuff like that. I was thinking, how cool would it be to have a threshold jewel for flame dash that would shake off chill when you flame dash or something like that? I don't know, like just more little interactions where you can customize skills to be able to play into that. But in a larger context, I just want ailments to matter because right now you're just with the flasks not being as reliable for the ailments anymore unless you want to give up a flask slot, right? Where you give up the flask being up all the time in order to have it up when you need to remove an ailment and gain the immunity. I just want something that I just want to play around being affected by ailments. I think it was a mistake to give us avoidance to ailments so easily, and the flask change just made it so that people feel forced into getting 100% ailment avoidance faster and earlier. And instead, I would just like to be forced to live with the ailments. I think map curses, for example, are in a very good place right now because they're not super strong, but you can't shake them off, right? So you have to either roll over them or you have to live with the fact that you have a 20% increased effect or like a base effect vulnerability or elemental weakness on you during the map. And I roll over all vulnerability maps, but elemental weakness is much less of a problem than it was before. It's only 20% resist reduction.
I think I agree with you on all of those points except for freeze. I think that I know this is going to be a hot take and you guys can disagree with me if you want. I think that from a monster perspective, freeze should just be removed from the game. Like, I don't think that monsters should be able to freeze. I think they should be able to chill, and that's fine, right? But when you run into a situation where I've used my last charge of a freeze flask, and then a monster freezes me for 4 seconds, and I'm just standing there, and I know that there's nothing that I can do, right? Like, my character isn't set up to survive for like 5 to 10 seconds, right? Because it's not really something that GGG has made worthwhile in Path of Exile, at least for softcore, right?
I don't know how hard you have to be hit to be frozen in place for 4 seconds. I doubt that that's something that happens. 4 seconds? But I think 1 second would be already enough. Like 1 or 2 seconds is already too much of standing still in the current state of the game. Like you can't stand still for that long. You can't wait out the freeze. You either are immune to freeze or you die to freeze. That's basically it. And that's where I agree with you. Whereas like 3-4 years ago, you would have been fine, right? Being frozen and waiting until you're unfrozen.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the thought. Act 9, one of the bosses, it's like a basilisk thing. It petrifies you.
Yeah.
Now, I love that mob's petrification, and I think that that's how mobs freeze should work. The idea being you would get chilled, be put into a chilling area. That chill would get more difficult over the course of 2 or 3 seconds, and if you don't do something about it, you will then be frozen.
Oh, that's a good way. I like that.
I like that because there's something to do about it, right? I fucked up. I didn't get out of the thing. I was stupid and didn't have a movement skill charge left over and I couldn't get out. That was my mistake. I didn't have a phasing flask either, so I still couldn't get out. All the escape tools I had didn't work. I wasn't prepared. I made the mistake. I got frozen. I died. My fault. Right?
That would make the flask current situation with flask work as well, because then if you hit the flask while you know that you're chilled, you can still react while you're chilled, right? You can't react if you just suddenly get frozen, but you could react while you're chilled, and then the flask would make you immune to it for a few seconds. So yeah, I think that's actually really good.
Yeah, I like that idea. That way of being frozen much better than our current, you're just frozen or you're not. I want that sort of build up, even if it's like 1 second. Like it can be pretty quick. There just has to be time for me to react.
Yeah, I'm honestly okay with the current state of the game, except for grasping vines. Everything else is fine.
The grasping vines on the hands.
The things that there's the fact that there's aspects of the game that there's realistically no way to build or play around to me feels super shit. And there's a lot of scenarios where like things like unspecified delirium slow and grasping vines that are
The hands,
really
yes.
annoying. And honestly,
hate
it's
the hands.
for the to the topic of like ailments. The fact that there's so many things that aren't listed as specific ailments, and they just keep adding new things. Like almost every league, we get a new debuff, and whether it's introduced as us as a tool to use, it's just a matter of time before an enemy will have it. So things like Crush, for example, or whatever. Like we get Crush, cool, but next league they get Crush, and now Crush is the problem, and that just kind of goes on forever. So if if they're going to remove our tools for ailment mitigation or ailment avoidance as a full thing, that's all fine and well. But there's about 90 other debuffs that are now in the game that we have to play around in a variety of ways.
You mean you don't like being maim hindered, slowed, chilled, hands from delirium, grasping vines all at the same time?
I don't mind them if there's ways to build around them. And every build, every build I play, for the most part, like real big boy builds and Total Self-Found I'll play, they all have hinder, corrupting blood, maim immunity, full ailment immunity, like curse immunity. I want all those things. I want to basically reduce the chance for non-planned occurrences. Like I want to have as much consistency, because even if just in my perspective, Path of Exile, getting builds to like 98, 99, 100, whatever, like consistency is key. Like I don't want to have 99% freeze immunity. I want to have 100%. Mm-hmm. So I just want to remove all the different factors, and now there's just every league there's some new rando factor that's just like this thing will now slow you, and it's like maim, but it's not, but it's like maim, and then now maim immunity doesn't work. And as long as they keep adding tools and opportunities to prevent it, or at least mitigate it, I'm A-okay. But currently there's like more debuffs coming out on a game-wide basis than prevention for those debuffs.
So do you know what it is in Delirium that slows you? Because I still can't figure it out.
It's a ground effect. It's hands coming up from the ground.
No, I see
it's
them.
It's not marked as anything,
there's
though.
There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, there's
at all,
nothing.
right?
Juggernaut,
Besides
you can play Stampedes. Yeah. Actually, no, I'm not Stampedes. I think it's actually an action speed slow.
Yeah, Stampede still gets slowed. It's so annoying.
Because if it's an action speed slower, it gets around Stampede. So it must be
Home's Roots or Juggernaut. I think that's it.
Or Juggernaut's it.
But like it's insane. There could be other things that are like that we don't even know about, really, that are just unknown slow number 7, or there could be more things in the future. Like sand is an example, not a very common occurrence in the game, but sand pits exist.
Yep.
Like the Shikari boss, sand pits are a sacking action speed slow, and that's just like to have these different classifications that just go. It just goes forever. Really, the more you look into it, the more you're like, Jesus Christ, I didn't know that existed. And then
we need more slow resistance. Then, yeah, I think that's what it is. I think we need like a.
My fear is the game becomes Grim Dawn, where we have 45 different resistances to a litany of things, and I don't want that. So either just classify them as ailments and then make ailment something, and then crunch everything together, maybe. But in the current iteration, it's like it's kind of getting away from them. So
I think that if they just classify everything that can change the action speed of your character as a slow, like just have it have that tag, and then make it so that you can have some level of slow resistance, like a percentage at least, maybe that would be okay. At least facilitate it somewhat, right? What I'm hoping is that when they do this big like a rework, as they call it, of defensives in this next patch, that they put a lot more on the skill tree, because right now there's so many holes on the skill tree of like I'm gonna use an older meme because this doesn't actually fit anymore with cluster jewels, but it's like, you remember like at the top like right side of the skill tree trying to build life, it's like, oh, you just don't build life because there's none there, right? With cluster jewels and stuff, it's like we have life now, right? Like that was fixed, but I feel like certain portions of the tree just are missing things, right? There's just nothing for you to choose there. It's like, if you want to go bottom left of the tree, it's like, good luck trying to find things that are going to allow you to deal with ailments, right? There's just not very much there. It's all in like top left and bottom right.
Yeah. Specifically also for the curses.
I know they said they were going to move some curse stuff, right? They said they're going to move the new curse nodes towards the middle of the tree or something like that. I mean, that's probably okay, but
curse is like the worst offender because there's 2 nodes for it total, or 2 wheels for it total, and they're both Inquisitor wheels.
Top left.
Templar.
I
Templar.
Personally, don't mind. Well, don't clip this. I don't mind the segregation of the the tree. It's okay if there's like specific areas that have specific things, and I don't mind the idea of pathing around them, because it's like that's kind of part of the build decision is like
Yeah,
I want to
that's
optimize
the
my
idea
path
of
to
the
grab
tree.
things, and especially when there's things like Thread of Hope and what Might of the Meek and Natural and like all these different utility jewels we have to basically like speed up that process or get a little couple extra passives away. To me, it's like really not an issue if the tree is kind of again like segregated into its own little specific areas.
I guess what I would say is I would say that there's certain areas of the tree that don't have as many options. It's not that it's like I'm fine with elemental avoidance being in the bottom right and the top left. That's fine with me. But give something else to like the bottom left or the bottom right, sorry.
Yeah.
Give something else to the bottom left so that they can use other resources to take elemental ailments.
Why would a marauder know what curses are? Like to me it has to maintain thematically. Like if it shouldn't make sense that a marauder would have intelligence because he's a big dumb.
I can argue that super easy.
Hit me.
A marauder would be unaffected by curses because he doesn't care about the
too dumb.
words coming out of your mouth.
Come full circle.
Curses are literally just people yelling.
True.
What?
Well, then you could add like negative 15% into it. Now it makes sense.
Yeah, but a curse is not like an insult that just drags you down.
I don't know if the curse
it's like
cares
a
if you know it or
magical
not.
thing.
No,
it's
a
spell
curse
on
is
you.
an insult that they yell at you. And we know this because they have in the past quoted that as the reason why curses would not affect totems, because a piece
Totems
of
don't have
wood
ears.
isn't going to get angry when you yell at it or upset when you yell at it. So
Can't
we
you
know
taunt totems,
it's
though?
verbal.
I
think
don't
totems
think
be taunted.
I think you misunderstood something. That I don't think they think that you're more likely to be inflicted with bleed because someone cursed you with vulnerability because you're upset about what they said to you. Like that makes no sense. It's just because
but that's what they said.
No, it's a magic spell.
You're missing
and
the
you
big
can't-
picture, Cat.
A curse can be on a living thing, and a totem is not a living thing. I mean, curses can be on monsters. You want to say that the random sea
Then
witch
what
that I
about
curse
zombies?
cares about the words that I say? They don't understand what I say. The little monkeys that I curse? No, nothing.
How come skeletons can be cursed then if they're not living?
Well,
It's
they're
mind
undead.
over matter, okay? It's
They're
like
undead.
it's like the orcs from
Oh,
Warhammer 40k, all right? They think and it happens, okay? It's too much. They think that, oh well, I don't know
Yeah.
what a curse is. It doesn't affect me whatsoever.
Zug. Yeah, I mean, but to bring it back around, again, like I think the tree being in its different places is cool, and I do
Don't say the
concede
word.
that it'd be cool to have curse immunity, maybe or whatever those same things in multiple positions, as long as they maintain the thematics of the zones. Like it has to be like if I'm getting a curse node in Marauder, I want it to feel like the trade-off is that I'm in Marauder and I'm getting curse immunity, which is a luxury. Therefore, there's a drawback. Like not necessarily.
and I'm fine
just
with
being
that.
too strong.
Because I totally agree with that philosophy. Like I mean, where's the point of having a tree with differing start positions if in the end everything is available from every start position, right? And to a certain degree, cluster jewels already alleviated that because you can customize sections of the trees regardless of where you started, up to your preference.
I think-
But maybe to ask in a more general fashion, do you actually, because I'm not sure from how you said it, I think most of you guys want that to be the case, but I'm not sure whether I want that. But do you think every ailment, every curse, every like status thing that enemies can put on you should have some way to alleviate or completely negate it via either the tree or itemization? Is that like,
Yeah.
generally speaking,
Yeah,
you think that
absolutely.
should be the case?
Like I think if there's like it's just think about like from a nature perspective, even if there's something that kills you, like in nature, there's something nearby that cures it. Like I want there to be some sort of option for there to be some sort of form of mitigation, even if it's just like 5 or 10%. But yeah, like I don't think there should be just some full stop. This thing is. I mean, if it's just damage, I don't really care as much. But if it's somehow impacting my ability to play past like damage, then it matters to me.
I just like the option that, because I think the problem right now, and this isn't a problem you'll have on hardcore, but I think the problem, at least for softcore trade, is that how much it requires for you to invest into certain kinds of defenses just ends up, when you're talking about raw efficiency, just not being worth it. And that's the problem that I run into, and that's what Chris had said, and what the other people on the podcast had said, is just that the amount of points on the tree you have to invest to get good defenses is insane compared to just, well, I can just do 4x times the amount of damage and just kill them before they see me, right? That's
Yeah.
what people do right now on softcore, is like, well, I'll just do more damage. If I kill the boss in 2 seconds, I don't have to worry about it, right?
And that's
And I
always an
feel like-
option if you don't care about dying.
Yeah. And I feel like the problem is that it's so much harder to get meaningful defenses in this game when it's balanced around the fact that things are meant to just randomly pop you in hardcore, right? Like they're just meant to just randomly be able to I don't know, man. The spirit that makes things what's the name of it? Tormented Martyr or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that's so dumb. It pisses me off every time I see it because I just like I can't prepare for it, right? Like it's just gonna be like, well, I just exploded, you know.
Well, the
like,
preparation is you slowing down. I guess that's the intention. But the game is not a slow game. So the problem is there's little microcosms of balance where every 99.9% of the game runs this way, and then one little thing runs the totally opposite direction, and it's just like a very it's a very constant reminder that there's like that happens so many times that Path of Exile. Just there's always that little thing that just is totally not consistent, and Path is filled with inconsistencies. That's like its only consistency is it's inconsistent.
And the problem with that being, yes, its counter is to slow down, but there's also no way to know that was a martyr ghost when you're moving at speed until you're already dead. So I didn't get a chance to slow down.
Better do better. That's the
we gotta slow down on every ghost. Then.
Yeah.
And
I think
then you
we've
have
just gotten weak. That's really what it is. As in our old age, I think we've just gotten weak in playing Path.
I think it's just I've realized over time that efficiency is like an overall thing that you focus on in PoE, at least in softcore, right? You just focus on what is overall the most efficient thing, and a lot of the time the most efficient thing is dying occasionally, right? Like, you just give up the fact that you are 100% safe from everything just so that you can go faster, right? Like, I just deal with it. When I see a martyr, I'm upset, but I'm like, well, I know it's going to kill me, but I just deal with it. Like, right? It's just like, I see a tormented martyr. Yep, I died. Go back into the map and keep going. I'm not going to give up all that it would take to make it so that I wouldn't die to that. Just one out of a 1,000 maps, right?
Yeah, it's just the numbers crunched. That's what it gets you to.
Yeah. But back to the ailment status sort of debuff topic. I feel like debuffs are important, and having to play around debuffs being put on you is important. So I don't think the game would be good if there was a situation where you could play without being ever affected by any of those things. So really, like the choices that they have is either they implement stuff that you can't deal with at all, right? And then allow you to basically get immune to everything that you can deal with, but then that one thing remains that just doesn't have any way to build around. Or the other solution, which is I think what currently is happening, is that they just have so many different debuffs that you can't possibly have the investment to deal with them all. That it's sort of a trade-off. Where like, are you willing to sacrifice that much defense, or offense, to be immune against curses, to be immune against ailments, or is there a point at which you're not willing to sacrifice more on either your offense or on other mitigations in order to get immune against that thing?
Well, I think that last point that you made there is what they're thinking, right? I think that the idea is you can become immune to everything, right? You absolutely can, but you sacrifice the damage, right? Like, if you're going to spend an aura slot, if you're going to spend jewel slots, if you're going to spend, like points on the tree, what ascendancy that you're playing, right? There's a lot of people who just literally play Raider right now because it does the two best things possible in softcore, right? Go fast, ignore shit. That's what Raider does, right? It just completely ignores everything. It dodges attacks and spells. It ignores elemental ailments, and it goes fast. So people play that because it's just the easiest investment to it. Yeah, you're not going to do as much damage on a Raider without gear, but it has the two things that people want, I think the idea is that I like the idea of being able to invest all of my resources into being immune to stuff, but you give up the damage. Probably from a hardcore perspective, the fun for someone from hardcore is the idea that you can die, right? So taking out everything means that, well, your fun thing is gone now, right? Because if you can become completely immune, then why are you playing hardcore, right? Just play something else.
Just to be very, very clear, everything we're talking about as far as full element immunity, sacrificing whatever, those builds already exist. If you don't have enough currency to buy them. Like there are builds that can do everything in the game with their eyes closed, full immunity. They have every single one of their clusters has rolled for 10% stun immunity. Like those builds exist. You're just if you're not playing one, you're just either too poor, you don't know about them. Like there's some combination of the two, and so it's not that they don't exist. It's just the accessibility for entry is like basically everyone else has to make a trade off, and some people don't have to make a trade off, and that's fine. But I think it'd be better if there was something like a trade off. For example, like the Arctic Armor thing is a great example of that. So if you want that thing, you have to pay for that thing in a way that's not currency. But there are builds out there that literally have just god tier immunity to everything.
To be clear, there's at least 3 completely different builds, not just Aura Stacker, that I know of in League right now who can open divination cards in Cirrus Storm still.
Yep.
There's 3 that I personally know of that could just sit there with an inventory full of them in a Cirrus Storm and just open them in the middle of the storm and then get up and go make a coffee and then come back and finish the Cirrus fight. So like fully immune to death builds definitely still exist. But I think that's a good thing.
For a very, very long time. Yeah.
I think
that's a good thing. I think the idea that build can exist is great.
As long as the game's not balanced around that build existing.
Yeah,
that's the big
when
big
you
key.
invest that much to make
if
that
you're spending,
sort of build,
if you're spending
you
10
feel
mirrors,
like a god, right?
You should be.
Walk around like a god.
Exactly.
You've won the game. Congratulations. You can beat every bit of content in the game. You've got 45 million DPS and you're immune to death. And good for you. You invested 28 mirrors to get the thing going. Like that should exist.
If you're playing 10 hours a day, that should be your last week of League. Like that, at least that should be your fun time.
And it's the part that probably upsets me most is like they do balance around that sometimes, and it kind of upsets me. It's like, let people have the power fantasy, right? If someone is literally just going to sit there, spend 3 months building up towards this build that completely annihilates anything, just let them have it, dude. Like, it doesn't matter, right? Like, just let them do it. We don't need to balance around that. It's not going to annihilate the economy. It just let it happen.
Like from the balance perspective, though, it's the big problem is that there's not a lot of diminishing returns for these things that are super OP. So you have things like even fire dot builds, which is for the guy they have a very common theme of like doing these sweeping nerfs that were instead of doing a targeted nerf to one thing, they do a sweeping nerf, and then like it's like the one kid in the classroom acts out, and then everyone has detention. Like that happens all the time. I mean, there's examples where they do it correctly. Like a good example is like if Blade Vortex was super offensive in one way, what they could have done is just nerf the way it was done, but instead they nerfed every single Blade Vortex build. Or if like there's one bleed build that's offensive, instead of nerfing that, they do every single bleed build. And they have a category
right to be annihilated.
Yeah, they definitely always they nerf in the most wide sense, and they never nerf targeted. And this is really ends up really not even affecting the builds that are those top 3 builds. Like they just say, okay, well here's an extra 2 mirrors of investment, no big deal.
The one that abused it that hard, that had 150 mil, now only has 50 mil, which is enough to obliterate everything anyway.
It's
and
just such a negligible difference.
Yeah, they're all.
It's
screwed.
like they've confirmed that they're going to nerf Forbidden Right totems, right? And I know Chris said specifically Forbidden Right totems, but I don't trust it. Like
Never.
I know that there are ways that you can nerf Forbidden Right totems without killing totems and without killing Forbidden Right. You just nerf the interaction, right? You could do something like make it so that Forbidden Right does half damage, but only gains. Make it so that the ability does half damage, but then does double, like takes double of your life when you self-cast it, right?
I'll bet my life that they shit the bed on this nerf. There's no way they're not going to nerf.
I think
every single totem skills we get nerfed. Every single totem cluster. That's going to happen.
Isn't it super obvious on how to nerf Forbidden Right totems?
There's
so many ways to change the scaling. You just change the scaling of health when on totems.
It's just you can add the tagline
by a totem.
Like that's it. That's the whole thing.
But I'm so like I know GGG's track record is not that's not going to happen. They're going to do something like, well, we feel like totems are too powerful. We're going to nerf the way that spells work with totems by 15%. And that was their fix for it, right? It's like, or they're going to nerf Forbidden Right into the ground, right? They're just going to make, oh, well, Forbidden Right was a little bit too powerful, so we reduce the amount that it takes your life for damage by half. It's like, so you just kill the ability just because one version of it is okay. And to be fair, I think Forbidden Right totems is cool. I think the idea is really cool.
Realistically, the build itself is only about, I would say, 20% more damage than it should be, considering it's effectively a glass cannon in a lot of situations. You could obviously build it to be much tankier, shield, all that jazz, but the trade-off is you're not in control of your totem, your damage fully. It's in a way a 2-stage skill because you place and then it kills, and then you don't really have a lot of defenses. So like there is trade-offs to the build, but I mean, I question whether it's like it really only boils down to 2 things. Is it the fact that they don't? Are there technical limitations to how they nerf things that preventing them from making the right decisions, or in the case like this, which is probably going to be the case, is it just total incompetence, like for them to not see this thing? Is it so out of touch that like if that's the case?
I've always felt this is what I've always thought about GGG is it feels like there are multiple groups of people within the dev team doing different things, and there's no communication happening between groups.
Could be Corona, though,
I've always felt that way. And it's like, one team will be like, well, we're working on this, and it seems like it's a problem, right? And then another team is like, oh yeah, that's a problem as well. And those 2 nerfs, like the double-pronged or triple-pronged nerfs, don't get communicated together because someone is not talking, and then we get situations like, I don't know. Does anybody play Blade Blast anymore? Does anybody play Blade Vortex? Yeah. I played Blade
the fire
Vortex
nerfs are pretty brutal though. Like they nerfed fire dot builds in like 6 different ways because of one build, and only one of those nerfs was really targeted towards the build for the most part. And it's questionable. And they just to be clear, like as a company for the game, in my opinion, they make 99% of the right decisions, and it's only because of the position we're all in that we're able to talk about the 1% that we might think is out of whack. But
you're saying 99% of the decisions they make are right, or you're saying 99% of right decisions they could make they actually make?
No, the first thing. I think that they because I think that kind of like what Duck is saying, they might not even have the conversations about what could have been done. Like because if there's different schisms of their departments, they might not even get to that phase of talking about it. It might just be like, oh, Flame Blast needs nerf, so we'll give it to Tim over here, and like Tim does it, and then they didn't talk to anyone else, and that's just kind of it just goes through. It's just like it's the same thing happened. Like the best example from my perspective in history was Elemental Proliferation was insane on Flame Blast. So instead of nerfing Flame Blast, they nerfed Elemental Proliferation, and every other build that used it, like Tiny Tim in the corner playing Glacial Hammer can no longer play his build now because they decided to nerf Eli Prolif. So it's like this decision posthumously is so obviously incorrect because it just again the other builds that were using it didn't do anything that was problematic. So it's just I'm not sure what the example is that we can use that when they made the right decision, because if they make right decisions, oftentimes we don't know about them because we don't know how many decisions that were made. Either. That's true. Yeah, I mean it's like there's so many situations where we have like rose tinted lenses, especially for things like Harbinger League. Like a lot of people I know say, "Oh, I loved Harbinger." Like you mean Beachhead League where you ran around in circles for 3 months? Yeah, like some things just they would look better after the fact, and realistically, in the time, it's the decisions they make are harder to look at in the scope of history for sure.
What I would like is I would like them to take a look into the past, because let's be honest, like, do you guys think that like a Vol Spark build like they existed previously, do you think something like that would be overpowered in today's climate? I don't feel like it's even like that amazing of a build anymore, right? I wish that they would go back and look at all of these builds that did exist previously that they just like completely nerfed the hell out of, and just give us some of those mechanics back, because they don't care that builds are that powerful anymore. Just bring some of the old stuff that just doesn't exist anymore back, right? Like unnerf those things. We have rare items that
off screen really hard, like the real back in the day, like the original one. Like that,
even for like legacy variations, like they could just revert legacy changes to so many items that were like Bringer of Rain could go back to what it was even, and it wouldn't really make a huge difference.
No, and I mean, is there not 1,000 builds that off-screen multiple screens at this point? Yeah. Like I mean, there's every build that is a ranged build can essentially do that at this point, right? Like that's the whole Deadeye Ascendancy is literally just off-screening stuff. That's all that they do.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like they can go back and unnerf a whole bunch of stuff and it won't be that big of a deal. Is there a list of legacy uniques Path
Oh
of
yeah,
Exile?
you could.
Does that
There's a so but it wasn't the wiki, but the wiki also is fucking 6 feet
oh, the wiki's
underground right
go
now. So I don't know.
oh god, I hate
There's a brand new wiki, which so
Really?
far I
Yeah.
haven't used a lot, but it seems a lot better.
The lady who
I'm
runs
not-
it is in my Discord, and she said it's pretty good. So I'll take her word for it.
Like I'm not ready to start suggesting it to people yet because like in the past I've just been like the wiki shit and unreliable. Don't.
You know what's really
Don't.
unfortunate.
I've been trying to use the new one, and it's so far been relatively good. There's been like one thing that was off about it, and I hit the little like report button thing and typed it, and it got fixed the next day. And
There's
I
a
was like,
there's a website that I have myself and a bunch of people I know that have been using for years now because it has the most accurate information for drop rates and percentages.
And it's
And
not
it's not PWDB. I'm not gonna say the name of the
Oh.
website because it's an RMT website that has bots running 24/7 that pulls such accurate data that we've seen extrapolate over time, and it's getting confirmed from data mining. But it literally is an RMT website has better data and usefulness than our game's Wikipedia, which is the saddest of sad things.
I mean, we could go down a huge rabbit hole of the issue between GGG and third party programs. I mean, there's there's
4-hour
such
talk.
there's
a pretty
so
good topic,
much
though.
that can be talked
We can
about
devote
there.
like a short section to that. I mean, it's not on the topic list, but like the things that are on the topic list are also things that are pretty obvious, and that one is one that we haven't talked about in a while. Because on the one hand, there's obviously positive aspects to a lot of the community tools being done by third-party developers, right? It fosters a nice relationship in the community, right? Like it does sort of.
I mean, I think the main positive of them relying so much on third party stuff is it gives them more resources to devote to things that third party could not do. I think that is the one and
Fair.
only real like big giant positive that has no real downsides, right? There's tons of other positives that we get, like I mean, look at like Minecraft, for example. There's Minecraft mods from third party stuff that a AAA company would never be able to do, right? Like it would just not be something that would ever happen, right? Look at people like Neversink. Neversink literally just has fun making the most ridiculous perfect loot filter like editor that they possibly can, right? I don't think anybody at GGG would do as good of a job because I don't think they'd be motivated enough, right? Like the amount of money you'd have to pay somebody to enjoy making the loot filter, like Neversink wrote an entire new language, like a new programming language specifically for his filter. Like no one at GGG would have done that. It wouldn't have happened. Absolutely not.
Is that
So
a
you
good
get-
or bad thing thow? That
I
they're
don't
not
know.
motivated enough. Like, I don't want to be jaded,
don't
but
know.
like it's kind of off-putting a little bit that it's like I don't want to say it's exploitative, but to me it always feels a little bit when it's like, oh, we don't have to really deal with filters because we have this guy who would do it. But what if he had a wife and kids over the weekend and like
And what if they
stops?
what if they disappeared? We're
And
screwed.
then it's like, what now? We have to
Look
actually
at the
pay someone to do a job that we should have been doing in the first place. Like,
look at the lag that happened between Arl getting hired and the community picking it up. Do you guys remember how when like POV suddenly just stopped working for like a couple months? Like shit sucked back then, honestly, like straight up. It was
Yeah.
just like there was nothing that you could do in Path
just
of Building
all of
anymore.
trade with POE.trade initially. I mean,
To be
Yeah.
fair, though, I do think that was kind of a problem with the way that they hired him. I mean, they could have sort of made it part of his job to maintain the
that's
Path
what
of
they were
Building, at
doing.
least for a couple of months.
I
Oh,
thought that's what they were doing.
they hired him to do development on the game itself. Like
Yeah, I
otherwise,
know,
he would
but,
have
like-
maintained Path of Building. But like, I mean, they could have somewhat mandated or like put that into. Like, I don't know. There could have been a solution because obviously, Path of Building is a very powerful community tool that a lot of creators and players just rely on. In the same way with Filterblade. And to be fair, Neversink, I'm sure you guys are all aware, I'm just saying it again for the people in chat, Neversink was offered a paid position at GGG. He just refused because for two reasons. He didn't want to relocate to New Zealand, and he didn't want his hobby to become his job, because he already has a job as a developer, and he enjoys doing filter blade in his free time. If I'm paraphrasing that correctly. We had never synced on a couple of episodes already, so I think I'm fairly confident in representing his opinion in that regard.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to Open. I definitely thought in hiring him that we were going to get an official version of something like Path of Building, whether it was going to be like in-game or an official third-party app. I thought that was going to be like his main thing.
Maybe we get it for PoE too?
Like, of course he was going to do development in other stuff because he can, right? Like, of course he's going to be part of the team. You don't only work on the one thing, really, ever. No one ever does in any big team like that.
Yeah.
But you often have a main project that, like, this is the thing, and I spend 60% of my time doing this and 40% helping with all these other things, right? And I was sure he was going to be working on something like Path of Building.
I feel like it is. I hate saying this because I don't actually know what goes on, and none of us can really know what goes on business-wise at GGG, but there's a couple things that happen within the company that just seem very questionable to me. The fact that, like, for the longest time, POB, even now, right? Path of Building is the only way that minion players can know literally anything about their minions, right? Like, you can't figure out minions in game. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, there's no way for you to figure it out. If Path of Building suddenly broke, and the people who are running it right now, the community people who are running it right now, decided to just quit because it was too much work, there would be a glaring issue, right? Like, there would be a huge issue for GGG all of a sudden. And I just don't feel like that should be the case, right? We should have that information in game. Why can I not have a tab on the character screen that just says minions, and then give some stats about each of the minions that you have available, right? Like, why can't I have that? Like the minions that you have summoned currently. I don't know. It feels very, very strange to me.
It's very fascinating from my perspective because I don't use POB or NeverSyncs filters. I make my own filter, and I just don't ever need POB. And
you write your filter from scratch? Like
I have since day scratch, yeah.
Well,
but something that's really interesting though, from the POB point about minions, is I still don't really see a point of POB personally, and I'll tell you why. For the minion example, at least you're saying, there's nothing about minions that you really need to know in POB, and what I mean by that is what if you have 40 million damage in your minions or 20 million damage, it's kind of irrelevant because you just feel it while playing the game. And if you're killing something and it's not dying fast enough, you need to get more damage on your minions. And if they're dying too fast, you need to make them tankier. So to me, it's very self-evident, and at least in that scenario, and for I'm sure others, what the issue is and how to fix it.
Well, but there's stuff like support gems that you can't really figure out. Like with a regular build, you can look at your tooltip at least, and even your tooltip is not an accurate representation of the actual damage that you deal.
Sure.
It's somewhat proportional to it, and if I switch a support gem, then I can more or less deduce from the tooltip, deduct from the tooltip, like whether this support gem is better or that support gem is better. On minions, you can't really do that.
But it's also irrelevant even then. So say the point where you had the wrong support in, and if you don't notice the difference in damage from having the wrong support in, isn't it irrelevant because the content's then dying at a pace you're acceptable with?
I mean,
if I'm killing Circe in 2 minutes with a technically incorrect support that you wouldn't know, right? But obviously you would know if you're a skilled player. But if you didn't know that, you had the incorrect support gem, and Circe is dying in 2 minutes, and that's acceptable for you, and you're not dying, and there's no issues. To me, that's not really a problem.
But why should specifically minions just be supported less? That's the problem that I have.
I agree with that as far as minions have no sort of information representation. But again, for the actual playing of the game, not for the paper path, for the actual path, it's irrelevant.
Well, sure, and I think that that's fine, but it's like when you said like, what do you care about on minions? I mean, the things that come to my head are accuracy, resistances, whether or not a gem is actually even working, like because like you said, if the minions are just one-shotting everything in front of you, that's fine. But like the main pain point with minions that I've ever come to that I needed Path of Building for was using them as support and trying to keep them alive, right? Like I recently tried and mostly failed to get stone golems for elementalists working recently. And the amount of like pain that I had to go through to get specters to stay alive, even in tier 16 maps, like having to move things around, making sure their resistances were good, like all of that kind of stuff, it would have been an absolute nightmare of testing without path of building, right? Like I probably just wouldn't have done it because it would have been too annoying. So I would like more info. We don't need it, but it would be nice to have full support for those kind
More
of things.
info is always nice. I would agree with that point. Yeah, I mean, for the resistances and the physical mitigation, there's only two places it comes from. I mean, we know the base data from PWDB, which is something I would agree should just be in game and like maybe a WoW style beast description menu. But once you know the bases, it's either coming from tree or clusters. That's it. So once you could just do the paper math, like 10 plus 12 plus 14, that's its res. Like that's the end of the conversation.
Sure.
It kind of reminds me of, honestly, like a while ago for calculating PDPS, like in the original Path of Exile, people like didn't know what PDPS is, and it's like, oh, it's top end plus bottom end divided by 2 times attack speed. Like I still use that formula and just can look at a weapon and be like, oh, it's 570 PDPS and heartbeat. And back then it was like magic, but it's kind of the same principle. It's just like most things in POB now that are useful to in-game information when it comes to like actual playing the game. You could just tell. And again, this is from the perspective of my knowledge currently. So I definitely, for a new player, it's very unfortunate. But for someone like me, it just doesn't make sense.
But the thing is, if it is that simple to work out and it is that paper math, which in most cases it is, why can't it just be there as a number?
100%, yes.
I shouldn't have to do math on do I have enough res.
Definitely.
Like imagine if you didn't have a res node for your own character and you just had to like count the res on your gear, like you need 100.
Another interesting inconsistency.
I need 135 res, so I'm just gonna like count.
Like that'd be cool if that was the theme. Like if we didn't know, also that'd be interesting. But it's just not the case. Yeah, it's like we know they don't know it's kind of strange, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would just it seems like there's so many little things in Path of Exile that to us probably doesn't seem like a big deal, but I'm sure like, oh yeah, we can't put minion information in the game because it would make your hideout explode or some random shit like that, right? Like I know it's probably some weird hard-coded stuff from 10 years ago that they put in the game that's still screwing it up that they haven't been able to fix. I mean, downsides of making your own engine, but still, I wish there was more priority on certain things like that, right?
And I do think that specifically with minion builds, they do realize. I just think they currently don't commit too much to that. But I think, again, Path of Exile 2 Copium, but I do think they know that for Path of Exile 2, that archetype has to be better supported in-game, and it should be playable without having extensive third-party information and tools.
Why do I need a second character to be able to summon my specters? Can't I just like summon the specters and have them be my
Gauntlet
specters?
PvP, only characters were disabled. You had to actually level the character to level 28 in order to be able to make a specter bank.
It's like, why can't I just summon my specters and then have those be my specters, and they're just always my specters, and I never have to worry about it again. I can just resummon them, put a cooldown on summoning. I don't care. Just little things like that. There's probably not a minion player at GGG, you know.
Yeah, I do think that they want to go there because they've made steps in that direction in the past. I mean, by implementing the desecrate table thing into the game as like an official feature instead of just a bug, by making it so that you don't have to re-summon things when you log out and log in again. And like they've made steps in the right direction with the minions. It's just, I think it's a very archaic system, as you pointed out. And I do hope that they'll take the time before PoE 2 releases to give it the support that it deserves in game.
Like Duck was saying earlier, like there's definitely I think someone in GG's development circle or balance circle that either no one plays minions or they fucking hate minions because it gets the most unnecessary nerfs from my perspective. Like Stolen Golem got nerfed like 3 leagues in a row and he offended nobody. Like it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
Have you tried to level a Spectre build in the last 2 leagues?
If you're not, I did it, but if you don't have like the good uniques, like the good Spectre uniques, or you don't have a good Spectre already from endgame, it's miserable. Like it's so bad.
Even if you get an endgame Spectre,
they die.
You
they die.
Start it with shit.
Gear, terrible.
They die. Like you need like +5 levels and to spec into the defensive nodes.
Or Wraith Lord is the best for that. Wraith Lord skull, the skull head. If you don't have those things, it's the worst experience. Like
you actually can't league start as a Spectre build right now.
You just have to use SR, like burning, like popcorn SRS is the.
Yeah,
it's just do that till 70.
Or skeletons or something. Like you just have to. You literally can't play specters.
Such a disconnect from the actual game,
like,
though.
what?
Like,
and so
that's not like some elitist
extensive...
point. That's like, yeah, it's like you're saying league starting. It's like this should be possible.
Like super extensive testing on it because Spectre League Starts was like my whole thing, right? And then I sent a whole bunch of that really detailed and examples of exactly how much investment was required for Spectres to even have a chance to live through a single zone, and how horribly over nerfed their low level was. And I was not advocating for them to be like rebuffed at the top end. I was just like, you've just hit all Spectres and they've all come down like this, but like level 1 Spectres weren't great to begin with, and now they're unplayable. And I sent all of that to them, and then I got a response. Somebody looked into it, and they said, we're happy with where that is. We're happy that is unplayable. And I'm like, what?
I have this like weird... I feel like GGG ignores the leveling experience a lot more than they should. Like, I genuinely don't think that when they make changes that they see how it affects leveling, right? Because there's certain builds that when the 30 to 40% hit came through to like all of the support gems, there's certain builds that you like, those skills don't have purposes anymore, right? I'm fine with there being skills that have like, this is a leveling skill, or this is like a transition skill, or this is an in-game only skill. But there's skills now that just don't work for anything, right? Like they just don't. And I don't feel like they do testing all the way through. Like I feel like they do the changes, they give the QA people a complete character, they run them into maps, and they see if it works, is what it feels like to me. Like there's some level of QA there, and I don't think it's the QA tester's fault. Like I genuinely don't think it is, after having been in like QA situations before. It just feels like the data's not being communicated through, is what it feels like. I don't know. It just feels like something's off.
Feels shit. That's just the easy way to say it. I mean, it just doesn't feel good for certain builds.
Yeah,
okay,
like,
sugarcoat it.
It just feels terrible. Like Spectres, you said, like zombies, you literally can't play early on. They're later. They're not even that.
Half
good
the
anymore.
melee skills feel like it's just unga bunga.
Yeah.
What am I doing right now? Like
Yeah.
it's just so strange.
And then they're not even good later on. Like, you know, it's just like, I would like skills to at least have identities. Like, yeah, there can be bad skills, but have them be a good leveling skill, right? Like, do people use, like, a Stormblast Mine in endgame? No, but it's really good for leveling, you know? It's like...
it's used all the time, though. Just not in endgame. That's fine.
I mean,
and
I feel like we're not, I don't know if we're there yet, but we're getting real close, I feel like, to critical mass of complication for balancing. And this is kind of a problem like games like even Dota had, where it's like we have too many champions and we just can't balance it all to where it's going to be really even remotely like close to the top end from the bottom end. And I think we've been there for a while in Path, where like the best skill compared to the worst skill is like a huge margin in difference.
Yeah,
and like, especially throughout the entire leveling process, it's like not even close.
I really would have liked to see more emphasis on fixing skills and instead of us getting new skills. I'm fine with like one or two new, like really well thought out skills a league. That's fine. You need new skills because there are going to be a subset of players that only come back to try to new skills, right? Like that's going to be a thing. But 19 new skill gems this league, or 19 new gems this league, and 80% of them are like almost unusable. And go and fix some older stuff, you know, like
RMP.
Yeah, like
hand down.
Spike Concoction is literally just traps, but worse. Like it's just traps, but more annoying and worse.
And decided like, not give it any fire scaling, just
and like
and less damage.
Yeah, and like Defiance banner is worse defensively than the offensive banners, and it's only a defensive banner.
Wait. The other thing that's got me, just because you've mentioned Concoction now, it was made just barely passable by the fact that you could put like an obliteration wand in your main hand and then disable it, and you would get the explosion still, and then they nerfed it, and it was like barely usable.
It reminds me of
and
Reaper.
They were like, not supposed to do that. Go on.
I league started Reaper, and that was an experience.
I'm so sorry.
I mean, it was like
for
the first 6 hours. I mean, it was like oh, I could one shot an act, and then I'm dead. Like, and then this does nothing. I have zero negative clear. Like the enemy's respawning around me, and then 6 hours in, they double its life and rest, and you're like, well, how the fuck did that pass? First off, but I'll digress. So then you start playing it, and then you're like, oh man, this feels absolutely terrible. It's like, oh, there's a cool interaction with Arcanist brand where I could use a second Reaper thing. Oh, now it's like still dog shit, but not quite horse shit. You know, we're upgraded the level of shit in my clear. And well, then they nerf that, and it's like, oh, cool. The skills. I mean, it's like you're designing a skill based off of one minion in a game designed around multiple minions, so none of the scaling works. It leads you to believe. But I mean, much like most of the, I don't say critical or negative points for making, it's just so much of it is kind of just like wait for Path 2 now. Not that it feels like wasted time just talking about it, but it's just like all of it can be basically chalked up to like, yeah, and it could all be fixed in Path 2, and this has all been like wasted air. You know, it's kind of strange. Really a strange timeline.
I really wish that, like I said before, the point I was trying to make was that I really wish we could get old skills to just be, to get some love, give them an overhaul, give them some new visuals, make them work a little bit better, instead of giving us a whole bunch of garbage that just puts more work on their plate, or just more refuse for the pile, you know? Like Lighty was saying, we are genuinely hitting critical mass with a lot of things in Path of Exile, right? We are getting to that point where the amount of depth that the game has is actually becoming like a negative instead of a positive in some regards, right? Like content depth is great. Infinite content's awesome. But infinite amount of just like worthless stuff that people can happen into, right? Like what happens when a new player is just like, oh, this charge dash skill looks really cool and I want to play it. What happens to that person? Do they just quit?
Probably probably quit, and then they probably come back a week later, Google Path of Exile, look into like two things, like maybe I was an idiot, you know?
Yeah,
but
it's like
there's so many unknown factors. Like we'll never know how many players tried and then like didn't come back. Really, I don't think we'll never know how many players again like were off put by a nerf and then decide to come back a year later. I feel like we lack so much information, which is just part of the course.
I think
kind of like minion
he was
stats.
Playing Charge Dash this league.
You can make anything work. I mean, just to clarify for anyone who's listening, like you could make realistically, you throw enough cash at it, you could make a build work. It's just that the investment, even then, it feels like a great example. Even this league is a kind of this strange hyperbole. Like people talk so heavily about how strong Forbidden Rights is, and then Spectral Shield Throw, specifically the Raider variation. But like the amount, the investment and point of entry when it comes to like bossing for Raider, Spectral Shield Throw, as I have both built in solo self-found, and I know how much the gear would cost in trade, is like 50 times the amount versus I could just slap 2x on Forbidden Right. And that same kind of thing goes to a lot of skills where it's like, yeah, I could make Heavy Strike work, or I could just play this other thing that costs 1/10 the amount and kills the boss 10 times faster. Which is kind of like back to the point of like the gap between the best and the worst is like the Grand Canyon.
And it needs to be somewhere closer to like, even if it was like 40 or 50% difference between like the bottom of the barrel and the top of the barrel, you'd still be okay, right? You'd be like, that skill is mechanically fun, even though it's half the strength, I'll still play it, but it's not half the strength. It's that looks mechanically fun, but it's got 0.25% of the power, and it literally won't be able to kill a map boss in white maps. So I'm not going to do that.
See you when you get buffed. That's pretty much what it boils down to.
Yeah. And like there's some room for skills that are just shit when you have low investment. My favorite skill in the game is Winter Orb, and it's trash. Unless you have money. Unless you have money. It's true because its damage numbers are so low that it's not really that good. You wouldn't want to league start it. If you've only got 10x to spend, I could do 100 builds that do more damage and clear faster. But
which is funny
if you've got 60x to spend, Winter Orb becomes fantastic because it's mechanically fucking great, and it's just its numbers are bad, so you just have to overcome its numbers, and then it's a fun skill to play.
This is
in fact, my favorite.
It's like the full circle of basically aura stacking, which was what since you have infinite damage added, you have infinite defenses. What skill mechanically just touches the most things? And it boiled down to like basically like EK can hit the most things. It covers the screen. Things like Spark when it travels infinitely. Things like Arc And some of them actually are good, but some of them are literally just mechanisms to convey your damage. Like, and sometimes those are good, but most times that's not the case. Most times it's like this shit thing stays shit. Very rarely does Winter Orb now come to the forefront outside of the convention of tossing on tons of currency, and then it loops back around. Like, it's a very strange system how that works.
And I feel like it's. Go ahead.
No, I was just wondering, do you think it's a problem specifically with Winter Orb? I mean, there should be builds that are like high
There's
currency.
60 things
builds.
like that. That's the problem.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that fall into that category. Like EK even right now is really
Yeah, I guess.
So
Okay,
it's really, I think it's really good in like a case like Winter Orb,
Yeah,
where
exactly.
it does feel, if I've got 60x to spend on it, the build then feels fantastic. It does feel like I've invested 60x and a Headhunter.
Yeah.
Like it feels like a really good build when I get there. Could I do it on less? No, not really worth it. But I think that's okay. The problem comes when a build is shit, and then if you invest 150 exalts into it, it's now capable of killing white map bosses, but still shit. Like you've made it function, but it didn't go popping off,
cost?
right? Like it's still a pretty shit build, even though you've invested a buttload into it. Like that's, if it's not good at the low end, it's not good at the middle, and it's not good at the high end of investment, then it doesn't have a place to sit. Which is also fine sometimes, right? Like Stormblast Mine being a leveling skill is fine, right? It's fine. It just, things need to have a place or there's no point in having that skill, right? It has to be something it does well. Doesn't have to be the best, but well.
Yeah.
Something.
Or chain.
Like Arcanist brand, where they said, absolutely, we do not want this skill to just become a random skill that you use to apply your curses and debuffs. And they said that they were going to make it specifically so that that wouldn't happen.
And
that's all it's used for.
That's the only thing I've ever used it for. What?
Yeah. I remember them specifically saying that we're making this like we're giving it a huge less duration modifier so that it doesn't just end up being something that casts curses and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that looks like a great ability to cast curses with. Yeah, let's do that.
Yep.
If
Now
you've
it's just
got
like a
two things
trigger
to
wand,
cast?
basically. That's all it becomes.
I think
Versatile
Mathel has
trigger
played a build with it as a main skill, but that's all that I can really think of. He
Mathel
plays
has
literally
played a
everything,
build with
though.
every active skill in
Yeah.
the game, man. Outside of Conversion Trap, maybe.
I tried to make Frostwall work.
Yeah. There's a couple.
Yeah. I tried to make Frostwall work, and that made it to Act 2.
Does Frostwall have any damage component?
Yeah. Yeah.
A very
Yeah, it
small
does.
amount, yes.
It's like Desecrate
Alright.
being your main damage dealer.
You could probably put it onto your Winter Orb build, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Just have all the flat damage sources. Maybe.
All right, since we went off on 800 bajillion tangents, do you want to spend the last couple of minutes quickly going through our list of topics that we mostly avoided?
I think we covered half of them by accident.
Yeah,
I mean, we
probably
still
the
got a
case.
little bit of time. I mean, no, not too
I'll
much.
tell you what. I'll open the document then. How about that?
I've had it
start.
open.
That's a good start.
I haven't looked at it.
Quick round. How would you rank Expedition versus other leagues? Let's quickly finish off Expedition. I'll say Expedition is probably my favorite league. It's either that or Betrayal. Betrayal didn't have the interaction necessary in order to be not a vanilla league, so I like Betrayal a little bit better, and I thought that the Betrayal board was a really cool system to figure out, and I still think it's one of the coolest system in the game. The whole thing. But yeah, I think Expedition is a really great league and probably a great permanent addition to the game, especially once we don't have to manually pick up the things anymore. They already said that they are going to make the things auto pick up and untradeable. So
Yeah.
I think
You go
it's a
first,
great
Dux.
I think that I like Expedition as a concept, and I feel like it's good for the game in the same way that Blight is good for the game. It gives a style of play where you need some level of preparation, you need some level of, mental investment into it to make it good and worthwhile, right? Like, I think that they did a better job with that in the gameplay loop than they did with Blight. I personally, as like playing the game, it's not something that I could find myself like ever doing unless I specifically wanted to just do a bunch of it at one time, right? It's not something I would like to see as like oh yeah, it's going to show up at 10% of the time, right? I don't necessarily think I like that. I would like it to be more so like how blighted maps are, right? Where you can take the logbooks, get a crap load of logbooks, and then just run all the logbooks whenever you want to. I just don't want it to be just another, it'll show up 10% of the time, and then you interact with it occasionally. I don't think it's going to be a good mechanic for that. That being said, I do like it. I hope they don't slap another 8% on it or whatever.
But yeah, in terms of leagues, like, what is your favorite league? That's what I mean. How does Expedition compare to it?
My favorite league of all time was Postfix Synthesis, and I think and I don't think it I don't think it compares too much to that, because Synthesis felt like a alternative in-game thing, like similar to like what Heist or Delve or things were, whereas like I said, I don't think it compares to something like that, right? I'm still salty about Postfix Synthesis being gone though.
Mm-hmm.
The Memory Nexus was so cool.
I by the way, am directly very much agree. Synthesis was also my favorite league once it got fixed. The beginning was shit, but that's not important. I'm directly against the front of what you said. I'm the exact opposite. I don't enjoy it that it's in every map. I'm only going to give this league like a 6.5 out of 10, the league itself. While I very, very much like the game state we're in more than I have in the last 2 years. But that's separate from the league. The league itself, only like a 6.5. But I'm calling it like a 9.5 for addition to the main game. Like if it just starts showing up in 8% of my maps, I'm going to be excited to do them when I see them, rather than annoyed by them right now.
Yeah.
Right? And I won't even do the speed through it thing that I do right now. Like if it's only going to show up in like 8% of my maps, I'm going to be like, ooh, an expedition. And I'm going to stop and I'm going to like plan the thing out and I'm going to be happy about that. And then I'm going to move on with my life.
Hopefully,
so I think it's going to be great.
If they balance the because the thing that I'm worried about is like, it feels really, I don't know. It's one of those things where you just kind of get into this black hole void of time. Like that's what I always called Harvest, was that when you got into old Harvest, like yes, it was super powerful, but it legit would get so bad that I would find myself in Harvest and I have to be like, chat, what were we doing? I don't remember what I was doing before I went into Harvest, right? I just hope that it doesn't cause that kind of problem, because if they only put in an 8% of maps and they don't balance the splinters, which I guess they're going to get rid of and just have them auto pop or whatever, I want it to feel worthwhile when I spend the time to do that thing, right? Because right now, if it just got slotted in as an 8% with no changes, I just don't feel like it would be worthwhile to me, right?
I think it'll drop 3 or 4 times the amount it does now.
Hopefully.
But you'll only see one of them.
Yeah.
Every, 12 maps or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. That's what it would be better that way, yeah.
For me, I just recently did like a tier list for leagues because someone had me do it, and for me it's probably one of my top 3 leagues. So I like, again, in the confines of when they came out, post whatever Harvest, like when Harvest for me was one of my favorite leagues of all time for multiple aspects, because of not only just the crafting, and I ended the game, ended the league with 6 tier 1 major gear and some characters, but also the unique map running in Harvest for me, like the killing the beast and dropping 5,000 uniques in one zone, like that stacking of that map situation I thoroughly enjoyed. And then when Beyond first came out, those were that and then Expedition were my top 3 leagues. And the reason I think Expedition is so good specifically is because it does something that I don't think any of the leagues that I could think of has ever done before, which is it offers massive gains when leveling for the end game. What I mean by that is, if you have a second character and you're leveling a second character, you can find a Danig or a Tujin while leveling, and they're dropping the reroll currency that you could use in the end game. So every time I find a Danig while leveling in Act 2, that's a logbook potentially that he just dropped him down. Like, you've never had that amount of end game value while leveling. Like, the currency that they drop has never been more impactful for the end game. Like, silver coins dropped in Prophecy, and that was like, could hypothetically be used, like, be the same value, but the chance of it being good versus the chance of me just having One Tujin while leveling Act 3 and it drops 3 exotic coins, like that's insane value. So I felt because it impacted the early game and leveling in the mid game so much because of the value of it, I enjoyed it thoroughly for that aspect. Not to mention just the bossing and thematically. I really much enjoy the bossing and the logbooks. Like at this point I've probably done about, I don't know, 400 or 500 logbooks and like 60 to 80 bosses. And they're super enjoyable mechanically, thematically. I love them. The uniques they introduced are okay-ish. Like some of the flasks are really cool and like Night Grip, but these are things I assume will be changed over time either way. But yeah, for those reasons, to me, it's like one of my S tier leagues as far as its impact on all aspects of the game, thematics from bossing, unique introduction, and the mechanic itself is really just, again, kind of more like a conveyor to access those things for me. But that's where I would put it, like S tier for me.
I'm not sure I would put it in S tier, but I'll definitely agree with like top 3. I mean, that without even having to think about it for extensive periods of time, it's definitely one of my top 3 favorite leagues of all time. And it just hits so many spots correctly. What you said about the value of doing encounters while leveling for other characters, which may already be an endgame, I think that's sort of a double-edged sword because it gets you to a point where, especially if you play softcore, you have little to no incentive to use the currency actually as you're leveling while you find it, because using a reroll on a low-level character is...
Zero incentive, yeah.
Yeah, well, except for Gwenin when you're aiming for specific bases, which are more likely at specific item levels. But yeah, like I'm not going to re-roll my Tujin at level 16 or something like that if I could re-roll it on a level 90 plus character, because then I'll get way better currency.
Well, with the way that the mechanic is, with the way the mechanic is set up, we're not going to see it while leveling anyways. So,
oh, I do hope that they move away from implementing mechanics in the core and then not having them in during leveling, because I think Harvest would have been perfect for leveling, but it's a whole different topic. Quickly to transition into the side note regarding the league. What makes a successful league for you? I'll start with the things that I really like about Expedition is the idea that I can pick my rewards at any point in time. Like, not that I'm not forced to do that in the maps. That was always a problem with me with Ritual. Because I just forgot about it, and then I opened the next map and I went into the map and was like, oh shit, did I pick my rewards in the last one? No, but I can't go back anymore. And being able to do that in my hideout at any point that I please is just really, really good. And I mean, that depends really. That's very league specific thing. But more so in a general sense, I think leagues should have like a crafting aspect. They should have like endgame content, which we have with the logbooks and the bosses. They should have cool, interesting rewards, which we have from 4 different NPCs. And something that I personally don't consider super necessary, but that GGG emphasizes, at least since Heist, like they want like cool lore and cool NPCs, like a cool overall theme, and their little vendor graphics, PoE style 2 NPC menus and stuff like that. I think that they all nailed it on those aspects for Expedition. And just also the right amount of micromanagement for the infrastructure in the logbooks. I mean, even in the maps or while leveling, I think it's not a problem. It's just I really feel the slowdown since I played a Headhunter build in Gauntlet, because I was blessed to get one from Gwenin. I just really see the pain of like having to pause your Zoomy map gameplay in order to read all the mods and to place down all the things. That's just really... It's not something that I would love to have in every map, but like Balor said, as soon as it's 8%, I think it's going to be great. And I really hope that future leagues hit those boxes as well.
I think my concern is that I personally like leagues that mesh well into the main game, right? I personally think that if a league does one thing extremely well and it integrates into the main game extremely well, those are typically things that I would consider like a successful league, right? I think the problem that we're going to see with Expedition most likely is that as the main league, it feels great. I'm worried that as a side content, it might not feel as great because I don't know that they'll balance it well enough. something like Ultimatum when it comes back into the game. You see the Ultimatum, you run the Ultimatum, you do the Ultimatum, it's good. It's just good at that one specific thing. That's why I kind of said before I wanted a situation with like logbooks or something like that, or like blight maps. I don't like running blights when they're in maps, right? It feels like such a halt to the gameplay loop that I enjoy, which is just run the maps, right?
Do you have a
It feels like such a
fear
halt.
of missing out by skipping them?
I just don't care about them, right? Like I care so little about doing them, about stopping, that I just ignore them, right? It's like, oh, I see a blight and I just run right past it, right? Like I just don't care about it. I would prefer more situations where if like I drop a blight map or something, I can use that blight map, right? Like I can just use it when I want to, or I can use this when I want to. Blight just feels like an interrupt in my gameplay flow. I don't want more things like that without being able to save them up, essentially.
So interestingly enough, you're doing that. Meanwhile, I'm putting blight scarabs on every single map I run.
And that's fine, right? Like if that's something that you enjoy and that's the gameplay loop you want to do, by all means.
So the difference is because I'm running maps in a zone that has blight passives, and that makes it happen quicker with way more mobs, way more rares. It no longer feels like a slow down waste of my time. When I encounter them in other regions, they're trash and I want to skip them. But when I encounter them in the blight region where I've taken blight points, suddenly they feel great.
And
That's how I feel about Legion,
right?
though. That's a lot of mechanics. I feel the exact same way, which is if I encounter Legion outside of New Vastir, I run right past it. Like I just couldn't. I can't be bothered. But like you do Blight in the right zone, like the one with Blight Titans, which I think is Valdos, and then like you pop the node and like 9 bosses come out for Blight. It's like, okay, this is a league now. Like this is something worth doing, kind of. And that just goes back to the point of like, I'm not sure if you should lock mechanics in their own regions, but it's kind of like back to the Watchstone thing. Why can a Watchstone outside of Valdos like roll auspicious? It's very strange, but you know, it just, these mechanics outside of their homelands feel pretty shit a lot of the time. Not so much for things like Harvest is a little bit less because it's still so high value, especially in Solo Self-Found, but things like Blight, things like Legion, like it just they don't really feel passable when you have played the better versions of them and the other zones are in.
And that's why I'd like them to be more specific to that. The idea that you said about them just not spawning in their not particular regions, I actually think that'd be great. I think that'd be awesome if they just only spawned in their good versions and left more room or the other things that could spawn instead in those areas, right? I think that would be awesome. It would give us more choice on what we can do.
What you're saying is you want to segregate them in their own zones. It's a pro segregation. Come full circle.
Don't put words in my mouth. All right?
I'm just trying to, emulate what Catmaster wants to really put forth in this podcast. The titles are going to be Expose Chris Wilson, Segregation. That's it.
That was your suggestion, Chris Wilson exposed. What did I want to say? Quickly, I had a good interjection before I forget it. That's hard to balance, though. Like, it's a hard balance goal if you want the difference not to be too big between the baseline league mechanic and the league mechanic that you invested into on the tree, because you want it to be still worthwhile to do while you're not invested. But at the same time, you want the investment to feel worthwhile, right? You want people to feel like, hey, I invested points here, I'm getting something out of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, but the point of that is there are 2 regions right now, which presumably the nodes for that will get merged together. So let's assume next league there's one region that has
0%
blight,
chance,
right?
in my opinion. Yeah.
Right. Let's just hope that there's one region that has blight nodes, because like anyone with 2 brain cells would merge them that way. I might live to eat those words in a month's time.
We'll feed them to you, friend.
Yeah, but let's just assume they've done it the logical way, right? The theory there is that zone is the only zone you ever see blights in. And so if you choose to invest into them, they'll be good. If you don't choose to invest in them, they'll be base blights, because there'll be other options there. But they will only spawn in that region, which is still a quarter of your entire atlas.
Would love that.
Yep.
Unless I put a blight scarab on it. Like obviously I could use a Zana pick or a scarab or something to force it somewhere else, but it won't naturally show up except in that region, right? And then if you do that feels way better. Also, instead of having 19 different things that have an 8% chance of showing up, you've suddenly got 6 different things that have a chance of showing up. And now it doesn't even have to be 8% anymore. It can be 12 or 15 if you want it to. Or if you think it's just getting overwhelming, it can just stay at 8 and there's less random shit.
I don't think that's gonna happen, because that's the entire thing that they pride themselves on, is that you have that much replayability because of so many random things that could randomly happen. And if all of a sudden only a quarter of the random things that could happen in your actual map that you're running, and 75% of those things happen in maps on other Atlas regions, then you take away a lot of the random generation, like replayability, and the feel of every map being different, and the potential of every map giving you that thing that you want.
You have like the passive tree though has regional identity, like we discussed earlier. Like
Absolutely.
Marauder has certain things in its area, which has certain things in its area. We have now a passive tree for maps, but that doesn't have regional identity realistically, because everything still spawns everywhere, which is another massive
regional
consistency.
identity for the buffed up things. The baseline things should be happening everywhere.
I mean, that's the point. Though. I think it would make more sense realistically if those things. I mean, how many mace stun nodes are in the top right of the tree? It's not that there's like some peppered out. It's just there's none except for the areas that they're in. So it almost makes more sense just to have what Balor's saying. It's just like if you're in the bottom right, that's where the blight is. If you're in the bottom left, that's where the Legion is. Like it realistically almost makes it so it's more thematic, because it's like, oh, this is the corner in which Legion occurs. This is like, like they have their little zones, and that I think would be healthier, especially when you're even after shifting the maps around. Like it may mess with the horizon orbs and that sort of stuff, but like you also have the bosses then become thematic to those 4 different regions. So like,
and it would give them room to like balance and curate an experience for the league, right? Because if they're going to shift the maps around into those different areas and choose maps that are going to come in and choose maps that are going to leave, then maybe they could set up different things that could happen. I just feel like anytime that they give us more agency in the game when it comes to what we can do with our time, I feel like it's better, right? I know that they like RNG, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best thing that could happen, right? I would at least like to try to experience it this next league. That would be cool. And if it sucks, then remove it. I'm all for it. If it ends up being trash, get rid of it. I don't care.
Yeah, I also think RNG is important, but like they've already announced that they've got way too much happening and that they need to start phasing out league mechanics, right? Yep. Like that's already been a thing. They're like, we're overwhelmed. There are way too many things. We still want randomness. We don't want every map to be the same, but there are getting to be way too many. Suddenly you've got a lot more room to play, because not every single mechanic in the entire game would be segregated into different areas, right? But this would separate a lot of, right? Like the ones, especially the ones that are pretty terrible unless you're spec'd into them. Legion's really not worth pressing. Breach is really not worth pressing. Blights are really not worth pressing unless you're in the right region.
Even Ritual, for example, like to a degree. Like Ritual without stones and without that node, I just skip it. Like it's so bad in comparison. It's not even as if they're not good in their own. But it's not that they're bad like in a vacuum. It's just in comparison to what they can be with minimal investment. It's a huge difference.
Yeah. And so I don't know, it just feels like if you separated them into regions, we've got a lot more playing room. We have to get rid of less. There can be some stuff that overlaps if it needs to, but like, I don't know, just the idea of that being a thing, just giving me control of being like, I would love to run Legion content a lot for the next 4 days while I'm on this Tornado Shot character. Yeah. Really enjoying opening Legions. This is making me have a really good time. I'm having fun. And then I make a fucking reverse knockback heavy strike Marauder, and I'm like, well, I don't want to do Legions anymore.
I'm sorry.
This is no good. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm never making that character. I was just trying to think of the worst strike skill I could think of, and then we're like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to go and do beasts. I'm good at killing those. There's one of them at a time. Like I need to go and do stuff like that. I don't want to see a Legion, right? Like giving me the power to be like, I'm not touching Legions for this character for the next 5 days. I'm gonna go farm this thing.
And maybe if it gets too overwhelming as well, they could cycle out some of those league mechanics occasionally. That's something that I've wondered why they haven't done. Because Chris like touts the praises of Magic the Gathering pretty much every single time we hear him. That and Diablo 2, but I mean, it's something that Magic has, right? They have like they cycle things through. They move through like standard or modern or and then there's things like Legacy, which has everything. But if say we hit that point of critical mass where there's too many leagues, but it's still good things, right? Like there's still good leagues. I don't want Blight to just be deleted, but the same way that there's like stuff on Zana's map device, maybe rotate one of them out occasionally. It'll force the meta to be something different if maybe a subset of items just isn't available, right? I know that may not be what they want to do because they want like massive open, you can do literally anything in Path of Exile, but
it would fit with the way that they're balancing skills.
Yeah.
It's like rotating things out in and out of existence, basically.
Yeah. They're following Blizzard's footsteps there with cyclical balancing,
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just feels like I think that Lighty hit it on the head with we're hitting critical mass of just stuff. And it's starting to get to that point where we either need to fix the old stuff or just cut some of it. Seems like they're cutting some of it since Prophecy's going away. I can't wait for 5 links and stuff to be more expensive early on in the league, by the way. But
from my perspective, though, like to me, it seems so easy to integrate so many leagues or even just crunch them together. Like Prophecy could really just all the things could just become fossils, really, and they could just remove the mods. For Prophecy, I mean, for Essence, for Prophecy. You could just subtract the lesser versions of the Fade uniques and make the Fade uniques just drop in game, and it would definitely make it weirder while leveling, but it wouldn't be like that big of a difference. Like there's so many things you could do for all these kind of shitter leagues that just can cut the chaff or just crunch them together, and it wouldn't really be that big of a deal.
You don't even need to get rid of the non-faded version. Like the drop version could still drop. You just add the faded version,
or even have like
tool.
Someone in chat suggested having Guff in 4 and Mastermind make a version into the faded version. Like there's so many things you could do.
There you go.
Yeah. You could have that either with a Syndicate or what I was going to suggest, Temple of Atzoatl.
Sure, as an outcome for corruption or whatever. Yeah.
No, for the
the vial. Yeah.
The vials.
Just without a vial. Just if you sacrifice these specific uniques, then like I don't know. Give them a tag.
I thought Ultimatum was going to come back as just a room in Incursion. Honestly, at one point.
That would be cool, actually. That would be a cool way to make Ultimatum go core.
Because they're both Val, I mean, yeah.
Chad had a really good idea yesterday, I think, for Ultimatum. Someone gave the idea that what if an Ultimatum... Because, there were like 3 main pain points of Ultimatum. People didn't like the Stone Circles. The Trial Master never showed up. And there were too many rares, right? Well, the answer to the Trial Master thing, like, what if... when you completed a 10-wave ultimatum, you know how he gets impressed with you, right? Or he gets upset, either way, right? It could be like a thing where if you finish so many ultimatums in a row, it's guaranteed that the Trial Master spawns, right? Because he's pissed at you and he just wants to fight you, right?
Basically a splinter that's not a physical splinter to
just like an old Oshabi.
But it's like a bar that fills up.
Yeah.
And then if you fail, it resets your progress or something like that, right? So it's something you could work up towards where you could eventually meet him if you're good enough or you're investing your character in being good enough at that mechanic. Because how many times did you guys see the Trial Master? I did a lot of Ultimatum, and I saw him less than 10 times, I think. I think I saw him less than 10.
I saw him 3 times, and I died every single time.
So I did 5,200 maps in Ultimatum, and I saw Trial Master 32 times. And from my perspective, I said earlier that I was doing a tier list of leagues. For me, in Solo Self-Found, Ultimatum is the worst league of all time because of how poorly designed Ultimatum was for a couple of reasons. A, the boss just never spawned frequency-wise. B, it was a very mechanically crashy league. The client just fell apart and the game was just shit. C, there was one portal, one attempt. In a game like Path of Exile with a client made of spaghetti, this never happened before where there's only been one attempt at a boss with no way of replaying it. The closest thing is Delve, but you could just redo the node if you fail it or you DC or like anything. Like it's never occurred before, where it was just such a massive amount of like fuck you. If you saw it, great. But his drop rates were also horrendously abysmal. In all 33 kills, I only ever got the helmet. I never even got the scepter. Like it was such a crazy league.
One scepter. I only got one scepter, and that's all that I ever got. I didn't drop anything else.
Especially as an SSF player, you usually have separate characters for different stuff. Like you want to have a fast mapper, you have a delver, you want to have a boss killer, right?
Yeah.
And then you're doing it on your mapper, you get the encounter, You don't know from the start that this ultimatum is the one where I would get the Trial Master. So you go into the ultimatum, you maybe have some shitty map mods, you go all the way to the 10th wave, or the 9th wave, and then all of a sudden he tells you, oh, there's a fight now, you can come and fight me. But you can't switch to another character. You have to do it on the map mods that you have without ever knowing that that map that you rolled extra hard because you really wanted that +1 drop or something like that, and now you have to fight a Trial Master with like 3 extra damages. And
why wouldn't there be 6 portals? Like, it just doesn't make any sense for the game. Like, there wouldn't be 6 portals. This doesn't happen. When has it ever happened before? We didn't get a repeatable attempts at a boss, or at least the portals we're normally given.
Bestiary?
You have 6 portals for Bestiary.
I meant like when you're crafting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess.
That's the only. I mean, I'm grasping at straws.
No, I know. Yeah.
I can't think of anything.
I wouldn't want to see 6 portals for Trial Master. I just would have wanted to see a portal appear that I could go through. If I die in there, I go back to my hideout. However many portals I have for the map, I still get to fight him.
Oh, that's fine. Same. Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
like,
that
so crazy.
Hopefully they
like,
do that.
Also, as a mechanic of ultimatum, like it reminded me a lot of like ROG right now. Like for Soul 7 perspective, ROG is extremely good early on for week 1, and then becomes completely irrelevant. But then ultimatum was a very similar thing. Was like, for me, it was also the cool challenging mechanic. And it's like, oh, I've built Maim, Hinder, and I have Arctic Armor on. The entire mechanic is just, I just run in circles, I can click anything. Like, nothing even matters for me now. And I don't think I ever died since. Like, that was the situation. Like, once you reach, like, your build is to a certain breakpoint, the mechanic itself was just negatable, basically. So it was just, for me, it was so strange, the decisions in that mechanic as a whole.
Hopefully it becomes better going forward. We'll see what their new version of it ends up being.
Did we ever did you ever say why your name is BigDucks, by the way? I don't know if I walked away during that part.
I
don't want to forget about it.
I was going to say that in the intro, and then we
know.
forgot about it, and then I was going to bring it up in the outro again. But good interjection.
All right. So the story is very lame. Like, it's not a good story. I tell it in chat every once in a while because someone's like, "Why is your name BigDucks?"
Can't wait.
Doesn't become less lame with all that prefacing.
And what I say is that back in the day in Warcraft 3, you used to be able to spoof your name, right? You used to be able to change your name to whatever you want. You could use a little tool and you could spoof your name to have a bunch of colors. Well, my name got reset and I needed a new name. And being the literal child that I was, me and my friends thought that someone said, "Oh, what about BigDucks? Because you can change one letter and it's something else that's ha 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 funny, So change one letter of the name BigDucks, and what do you get?"
Depends which letter, I guess.
Exactly. But there's one specific one that you're thinking of.
B? BigDucks? Is that it?
I think Balor knows which letter it is that changes.
Oh, Big Cucks. It's Big Cucks, right?
That's another one, but that's not the main one.
Anyway.
Big Docks?
Yeah, Docks Farmer.
Docks is good. Big Docks.
Totally.
Big Docks.
Big Dock Boy.
But anyways, that's the whole story, literally. There's nothing else to it.
You're right, that's pretty lame.
I told you it was lame. It's not the origin story is not great. It's not.
Have you thought that if you just made up a better fucking story, you could tell people that?
Oh yeah, you should just lie.
It would be funnier, sure, but it's just nice to just have people not bring it up because I make the story so terrible that then people just don't want to hear it. And
why don't you say you were on the FBI watch list, your house was raided, you had a code word to tell your mom so she could pick you up, you can grab your go bag, and that code word was BigDucks because you saw it in a museum when you were 7. Like, you're good to go.
But then my chat wouldn't be able to say all the different. They're even doing. You can see who in my chat actually shows up because they're doing the. Oh yeah, Fig Ducks. Yes, that's my favorite name. The chat just explodes with that.
What about BalorMage? Where'd that come from?
It's just supposed to be Balor, but the word Balor is taken everywhere. So, as part of Irish mythology, he's a one-eyed god. He just looked really cool. that was it. But then Balor is taken nearly everywhere, and when you Google Balor, you get the mythology version, and I had to add something to it. And most of the time, mages are the things that I play in games, so I just add mage to the end.
There you go. What about Catmaster?
Well, basically, I grew up with cats. I always had cats. Always more of a cat than a dog person. Cat affinity, and like when random cats come up to me on the street, I pet them and stuff like that. And they trust me really easily because I like to think I speak the language of cats, or sort of like I communicate with them on a different level than like someone who didn't grow up with cats. And so I was walking down the streets in Middelburg in the Netherlands with a friend of mine who was studying with, who were visiting his dad. And on the way, there's like this random cat I'd never seen before and came up to me and let me pet it and stuff like that. I know it's nothing special. Like cats obviously are domesticized, and they do know that people won't hurt them and that they can get some cuddles out of people if they're behaving nicely. But anyway, that cat just immediately trusted me and not him, and I guess he was somewhat jealous. I was like, yeah, you really get along with cats. And I was like, of course, I'm the cat master. And then my friend, who was like basically a Native American speaker, found that word cat master to be so ridiculous as a name that he literally couldn't stop laughing about it for like the entirety of the walk until we arrived at his dad's place. And then later on, when that friend got me into League of Legends, I actually got Catmaster on League of Legends, and then he always made fun of me. Basically, he was like, yeah, you won that lane because the guy that you're fighting couldn't stop laughing about your silly name, basically. And the name just provided so much room for making fun of me that I was like, okay, yeah, that's probably gonna be my name. It's like, and then added the OP because Catmaster obviously was taken. OP is like the sarcastic OP, like the OP emote in Twitch chat, right? So like Catmaster OP, you know, like kind of
all the directions I thought this was going to go. By the way, I did not think it would go that you were finding stray cats and taming them in the streets. Basically,
it's a superpower, man.
But yeah, good. Basically that's why I'm Catmaster. Why are you Lighty?
My last name.
That's literally your last name in real life. I think we'd had that on Slippery Jim's podcast before.
Hey guys, MatLighty here.
I've changed my mind. Lighty's is the most lame story.
Thank you. But I'm actually adopted, and my father was Einstein, and then I found $10. Yeah.
And then everyone clapped?
Everyone claps. I mean, everyone, universally. Mm-hmm. The moment I was born, in one clap, in unison, that was it.
What's your connection to Demigod King LOL?
What? Wait, what do you mean?
Wait, what?
You wanted me to throw you a curveball and ask you something that you completely didn't expect.
In the pre-podcast meeting we had, as we were ending, I told Catmaster, at some point during the podcast, gaslight me, like just out of nowhere.
Nothing wrong with Demi. I think, but Demi is a cool guy in many regards.
He was in my I had like the first guild in Path of Exile, and some of the people were in them. Demi was one of the people that started in my guild. I didn't teach him how to play. Basically, taught him how to play Path. Same thing with like Don the Crown. There's a couple of people that are all my children.
No, I just had that question in my head because I just wanted to know, because I think that's the first time I ever saw your little light bulb symbol and your name on YouTube pop up was a comment in a Demi video or under a Demi video, and then I was like, okay, is this Lighty guy? Is he also a standard crafter? What is he up to? And then
I was like the first standard crafter. It was me and Afak pretty much. Back in the day.
That's also a name I haven't heard in a long time.
I know all the old names, all the old gods. But yeah, I mean, it was just pretty much. It was just one of my people in my guild. There was just so many of them. Like Belton's another one that is not a name very much known these days. But yeah.
Belton.
Oh God. Oh.
He was one of. I mean, yeah, he learned about Path because of my Cyclone guide, which was when he was featured on Build of the Week or whatever that was.
Nice. Well,
the old tales.
We talked about saturation in terms of league mechanics. Another saturation point that we have, or that we're getting close to, is private leagues and events during the 13-week release cycle. Yeah. The question that I wrote down was, do you think this many events have a positive effect on player retention?
Well, we talked about a little bit in the pre-cast thing, and I have the exact same stance always, which is I think that because now they basically associate like the middle and like part of the end month with like this is when all the private leagues are hitting. I honestly feel like there's going to come a time again where they're like kind of just giving up on that portion of the league and maybe even making leagues lesser because they're just like, well, that chunk of the league is private. No one's going to play anyway, so everyone's going to be playing the private league, so it doesn't really matter. Like, I personally wish there was no private leagues because, or at least like very little of them, even between leagues maybe, because I want it to be like, there's 3 months. I want the first week of the league to be you fixing the league, and then the last week of the league to be telling me what the next league is. Everything in between, I just want to play Path. I don't even want to like hear from them. I just want to play Path. So everything but that to me is just intrusive. So I can't say if it's retention. I have no idea. But like, I just don't want to. I don't really care about those things because the game should be good enough as is for me.
My thoughts on it are that I don't interact with the leagues most of the time because I just feel like I don't have the mental space to do it. From a like Twitch perspective, or like it's super positive because it like reinvigorates the community a little bit. Mm-hmm. From a gameplay perspective, I genuinely avoid it like the plague. I don't think any of them are really that much fun. It's not the reason why I play Path of Exile at all. It doesn't help me with content. It doesn't help me with any of the stuff that I like to do, so I avoid them, right? Do I think it's good for the cycle or player retention? I mean, it gets people thinking about the game right before the new hype thing starts. I know I asked my chat, I did a poll on YouTube whether or not people, I can go look at it right now actually, whether or not people liked the gauntlet or did anything with the gauntlet. Let me see what they say. Let's see here. So
it's like real oversaturation though, like to have these things, the same things every league.
Yeah, and so I asked, did you end up playing the gauntlet? And it was 10% of people said yes, they played it. 20% said that they watched it, and then 50% of people said that they preferred to keep their sanity and they had no interest in it. The other ones were like, what is the gauntlet, essentially? So, I mean, they're popular with the people that care, right? But I don't think they actually do very much for the community at large.
I really, really, really like the BPL.
It looks like it's fun.
It is the only one I touch, especially because they're going to keep it to only 3 or 4 days now. And so it's like just a little 3 or 4 day break from the normal stuff to do a big team thing. That's a very different feeling, feels great, very fun, very engaging, and then back. I don't do any others. I don't do any of the other leagues, and I'm probably never gonna.
There's one that's happening starting Friday that I'll be doing, which is the Anomaly guys are doing one, which is like hard league light kind of, or hard path light. So it'll be like no vendors, no magic and rare drops, which I think is kind of interesting. And it's also locked to using only the 6 least represented ascendancies as far as PvE Ninja is concerned. So I kind of like restriction-based leagues, and that's kind of cool. Like the idea of having to find your own gems and playing with what you get. I like that. It kind of makes it like a roguelite in a way, which I find it. But I definitely don't like the concept of like long-term private leagues, and especially not ones that have cash prizes from third-party companies. That's like a big bad taste in my mouth.
See, I love that. I'm not going to get involved in them, but I love that it's happening.
I think it's good that there's like, because obviously the cash prizes will motivate a lot of people. I think that it's fine, but I get what you mean, right? Is that like if we're here to play Path of Exile, injecting a bunch of like weird money into it and doing all this extra stuff, I don't know. I mean, I think that the idea behind the leagues is cool, but I just wish that there were more GGG sanctioned things, right? Like that had more support from them that we could play as an entire community. Yeah.
We used to have things back in the day. We had the race leagues and all that fun stuff, and then Descent, and everyone loved them, and then they were gone. And now we cry. I mean, hopefully things like Endless Delve, I thought was a really large and about. I think it was because people kept asking about it that it was a thing. I'd like to think it was something that they considered. And realistically, I think that Endless Delve could just be a part of the game as an alternate leveling. That's like for a whole other discussion. But I think that I like the idea of them experimenting more, and I think that they used to experiment a lot more with mechanics, as far as like this might work, this might not work, but it'll be fun, and do the same thing for events like Endless Delve. Like imagine if we did a zone and the zone, like everything's triple ghosted. Like that'd be a cool little week-long event. Like there's things you could do like that, kind of mayhem turmoil-esque. Those always seem to be fun. And again, shorter the better, so maybe even 3 to 4 days, like Baylor's saying, because it's just, let's do this, then we can hop back to what we're doing, or between leagues. There's definitely opportunities for more things like that, and I really do wish that Path was kind of more in charge of doing it than like leading up to community, because it kind of gives me, again, like, I don't know, it sounds cynical, but it gives me a similar feeling that like Neversink is the one making the filters. Like I kind of want them to be hosting the things. That maybe if the ideas are community driven, that's one thing, but it seems like there's very limited to no like initiative from them to do these sort of events, which I would like to see. Maybe they do something or are more involved in some way. Like they did for Charity League, they helped us out big time for the charity one, but that's obviously upon asking them and like doing everything, doing all the legwork,
And if there's going to be more third-party people doing it, it's a big problem when it comes to like development type stuff is you can't just throw more people at a problem and have it be fixed faster, right? That's typically not how it goes for like game development and stuff. But things like setting up community events and facilitating those kinds of things, you can throw more people at that. Like that's a problem that can scale with people, right? So I feel like either they could, I know they have problems with hiring, but I'm sure they could hire some people to like facilitate community events, right? And just like work on those throughout the league and have them be, that's the only thing they do. Even if they just work with like Zizarin or work with Badger or work with other people, right? But give us more, like now we're having the gauntlet inside of the client. That's a huge plus, right? Just literally it being a piece of the client is a huge plus. If we can get more of that, like more ability to actually impact the game itself and come from within the game, it would be very, 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 very positive, right?
They just actually have a new guy. I think his name is Nicholas, who's like doing more of the community managing stuff. But that's again really just upon request. Like it's not like an initiative based thing, or it's not like he's really like doing stuff unless asked about it. And there's definitely tons of opportunity to do more event-based things or have them more woven into the fabric of the game, for sure.
I definitely want more GGG organized stuff again, and I do hope that the fact that they haven't switched back their schedule to one where, like, I mean, the 13-week release schedule to one where it would line up with a Christmas release makes me hope that this Christmas we're gonna get a lot of GGG events again. Maybe like a mini race season or like 3 small events like Turmoil, Mayhem, Endless Stealth, something like that for a little bit. That would be super cool. I really, really miss the race seasons though. I thought that they were, I mean, that's what really got me into the game back then when I started playing.
The accessibility was really high for those also because there were so many throughout the day that even anybody from any time zone could at least compete in 1 or 2 in a day, which I thought was a nice thing. And kind of to that point, like we talked about the event things, they used to have, this is a while ago, but the first people to kill Adziri, the first 100, got an exclusive microtransaction for Adziri, which a lot of people don't even know about that. But there was a helmet MTX that you got if you killed Adziri, the first 100. Like, I'm not sure why that initiative, I mean, that can't be impactful enough on their MTX sales that they stopped that. So, like, they could easily do that for every single league for the new boss. Like, that'd be a really cool initiative to, like, drive hype. Because, like, what someone said earlier is because of Gauntlet, hardcore pretty much just dies trade league because of Gauntlet. People stop pushing for 100. They just wait for a Gauntlet. They don't even, like, trade just falls off the map. And there could, if there was an incentive for 100 people to get an MTX, like, exclusive that they could show off, like just some really cool EP and stuff, that would definitely be fit really well, I think.
I think they need to do more of that kind of stuff. Like when Chris was talking with the softcore Andes, I think them talking about needing more like leaderboard type stuff, needing more like, because the thing about it is that the type of person that's attracted to doing something at a very high level and being proficient and competing at it is the kind of person who wants that recognition. They want people to see their name on that thing in game, right? So if you give them that, they might be more interested in pushing that, and then that gets people watching it, and it gets people like interested in, who's going to be able to do this first, or who's at the top, right? Like, don't you kind of find it cool when you see that little message pop up in chat when it's like, someone is at 800 bajillion delve? It's like, oh shit, that guy's that deep into delve? Like, that's cool, right? That
same thing could definitely be replicated through a bunch of different means, whether it's exclusive microtransactions. I mean, they did demigods, but if why don't you just make a demigod in MTX? Like that would be so much cooler. Because imagine you trade with somebody and it's like, oh shit, this guy's got the demi, like he's a real cool guy. Whatever. I don't you trade people do, but yeah, that'd be like an interesting thing to have. Just it's just like old school arcade cabinet hide scores. It's no different. Like the lizard brain is the same from then. I mean, you just want to have your name on the thing and show off the thing.
I have 3 demis in my stash. No one ever knows about them. If I wasn't a streamer, no one would know about them. Because they're not, I can't show them off. They're not.
That's the problem. Yeah, like why was it not MTX?
Show them to anyone. If I take them out of my stash, they're gone.
It's so strange. But like if it was an MTX, you would wear it, right? For sure.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly the point. Yeah, like
we're still waiting for it. I mean, they announced that at some point that was the plan. I mean, they haven't said anything about that for a long time, but they said at some point that was the plan to make skin transfers not consumable, but make it like a permanent skin transfer that you could permanently turn an item into a skin. I wonder, actually, that's one of the questions I would ask Chris if I got to interview him. Is like, actually, is that still a plan? What is the plan with that? When are we going to get it? Is it ready for PoE 2?
For people don't realize, even not even to start about MTX because I'll go on for hours, but like there's still uniques in the game that don't have microtransactions. They don't have like in-game art. Like Anziri's Acuities still looks like basic gloves. They have no in-game art. To me, that's like just the most offensive thing ever. That we can have that, but every 5 minutes they'll pump out an MTX. Like it's so strange.
It's completely understandable though, from a management point of view. You have like so many resources. Why would you dedicate something to such a niche item of the game that even in nowadays meta is pretty meaningless?
In that scenario, people have, and this is a good example of when like hiring people. People have posted like 3D artists have made entire in-game renderings of items and be like, you could just take, here's this file, here's this JSON file, take it, like just put it in the game. But it's just not the case. I mean, it's not because of like lack of trying, but people have tried to just be like, here's your MTX skin, we'll do it for you for free, no problem. It's like imagine if like Neversink made all the filters and they're like, no, we don't want to use them. Like we use our old filters in 6 years. Like that's how it feels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think art is definitely difficult, and I don't know what technical limitations they have with like the way that their art and stuff is set up in game. Who knows? Loading art into their like whatever engine that they made might be an absolute nightmare. I don't know. I have no idea. But artists are definitely like good artists are very hard to find. Like very like quality artists for things like a video game like Path of Exile. They're very hard to find. I know they said that they're hiring as many artists as they can. But I think, unfortunately for GGG, them being positioned in New Zealand is a little rough for them. U.S. office win?
China office, really. Just go to China. Outsource everything to India, then have the game run remotely, then go play a different game. Problem solved.
All right, because we're running out of time, I quickly wanna ask, what are your immediate hopes for the future of Path of Exile? I think we touched a little bit on it, but if there's anything that you haven't mentioned yet, I think that would be cool to still talk about real quick. Is for 3.16, 3.17.
Honestly, the one thing I haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, no, please go.
The one thing I haven't talked about yet that I wish that there was even people thinking about at GGG, and I don't know if they are or not, is the process of making multiple characters per league. It feels like every time I hear GGG speak, like Chris always talks about one character. I've never heard him talk about making multiple characters and level them up. Like during all of the podcasts, I was sitting there and I was listening to him. He's like, well, the idea of when you play PoE, right? You level your character, you get up, you gear it all the way to the teeth, and then you're done for the league. And I'm like, well, what about the people who play multiple characters? Can't we have like alternative leveling methods? Can't we have like incentive to make additional characters? Like, I don't know how you want to do it. Make a currency orb that can drop that gives you some levels or something. I don't know. Make it max out at 70 or 68 or whatever it is, right? Just something
Lord,
to
not that.
just make it something that allows you to facilitate multiple characters. I said use delve, use heist, use like mapping, make it available from level 1, right? Make it so that you get to the end game, you master heist, right? You kill the twins of heist, and that unlocks the ability to do heist from level 1. Make it so that if you kill Ol, it unlocks the ability to do delve from level 1. Make it so if you kill Awakener 8, makes it an ability to do maps from level 1. Just something, right?
Yeah, it sucks leveling. I mean, like I said, I have 11 characters this league, and it's at the most for me. It's just a half a day allocated to getting the maps, but for some, those are more time constraint or skill constraint. It's not like they're now allocating, could be even at times 20% of their playtime for like the month just to get a character to base playability. Like that must feel shit to a degree.
And then Chris said
yeah.
his answer to it was PoE 2 is just going to be a better campaign, and I'm like, well, yeah, but it's still going to get boring. Like after a while, I'm not going. I don't want to read a book over and over and over and over and over again. It's not going to be entertaining anymore, right? Like make it so that we can do the campaign once per league and then do some other stuff afterwards.
The only thing that I'm relatively insistent on with my point of view on that is that there should never be a way to skip leveling. Like that's a bullshit thing, and I never ever want to see it. Like there shouldn't be a way to buy it. There shouldn't be a currency orb. There shouldn't be anything that just be like skip 30 levels like that.
But alternate method you're saying is acceptable.
Alternate methods super good.
Yeah, but like expedited alternate
right?
methods, as in like delve, which gives on average much more experience that scales much higher than map questing.
And you'll definitely be able to level faster doing it in a delve or heist scenario, provided that it still costs me something. So the idea that I had for that was something along the lines of, let's say you make a secondary character, let's say per act that you wanted to like skip, basically, you would just be able to pay X amount of sulfite and then be locked into the delve with like a gem vendor there and everything until X level. Like say, I want to skip all of part 1, and they're like, okay, you select all 5 of those acts and hit skip or build a delve or whatever the hell it is. And then you're locked there until level 50 or whatever the hell level Katava 5 is that I've forgotten about. And then when you get there, you can't delve anymore. You're spat back out to the campaign. You've got all of the points that you would have gotten handed to you, etc. Right? Same sort of things for heist. It should cost you a decent chunk of rogue markers, but then you've got the ability to skip this amount of content. And that could go all the way to maps, and I'd be fine with it so long as it costs you a resource and you still have to level.
Yeah, I think I've softened up on that a little bit. Like, I do agree that it would be cool to be able, but I already think you can do that. I mean, you don't get to skip waypoints, you don't get to skip act progression, but you can level to act 4 and then just directly enter delve, level all the way to 70, and then just steamroll with high movement speed.
And it takes just as much time.
Yeah. The only problem is
from act 4 to act 10.
You're limited by movement speed with gear, right? It's only movement speed that's really the thing that limits you, and you can already have max movement speed while leveling on a character, right? Like you just throw on 7 league steps, you get the right movement skills, you get the right movement stuff, and you're only really limited by movement speed. So I don't know. I think something alternative would be nice, and like, it's great. I'm glad the PoE 2 campaign is going to be fun and it's going to be interesting, but it's going to get boring eventually.
Yep. Possibly. I don't know. I don't think we know enough about the PoE 2 campaign to know for sure. And I've said that a couple of times already on the podcast. I'll gladly say it again. I think that as you progress through the PoE 2 campaign, it's going to almost seamlessly transition into maps, in the sense that it becomes less and less linear and less streamlined, and that there's more and more random factors and more ways that you can have the playthrough be completely different from your previous one. I feel like Act 1 is going to be fairly linear, like right now, but Act 2 already we see that there is a moving town zone, and you can kind of decide for your own in which order to tackle the different regions in Act 2. And I just hope that there will be some sort of like almost leveling mapping section in the acts where you get to level like a couple of levels, or 5 to 10 levels, and you have to do different modular areas that you can select how hard they should be, when you want to do them, where you're going to do them. We'll see, though. I don't know.
I definitely think
I just think that that's naturally where they want to go.
I think one thing you said is they definitely have some room for opportunity of explaining more mechanics in the campaign. Like, I really hope that they do explain more of the basics of mechanics through the campaign. Like, make there be a quest where you have to use an essence on an item, right? Like, make there be a quest where you have to do this thing. Not you can, you have to do this thing at least once, right? I feel like it's a much better way to teach the game and get over this hump of new players not understanding what things are. Just make a scenario up in your head where something needs to happen, where, like mapping, for example, we kind of have that with Malagaro. Like, we kind of have that, right? The Malagaro map. We need more of that, I think.
Like the thing with Ward this league, we have a whole new defensive mechanic of Ward. And if you look in the information section in-game, there's no mention of Ward at all. Like, that's a bit strange, don't you think?
Yeah, in general, that help index is a great addition to the game, but it really needs some updating. Like, it really would benefit very much from like one employee having full
there's not much context in it. Like, it's raw information, but it's not contextual towards how the game actually is. So they talk about betrayal, but they don't talk about, like, not even the intricacies, but even like the basis of why, what, who, what, where. Like, it's just, if you click this could happen. Next section. Like, it's very strange.
Yep.
And
but
nobody
again,
clicks
our
that.
perspectives are very. It's hard to view it through new eyes, since we know what we already know. You know.
Most people don't even know, like, the help thing. Like, literally, I can't tell you how many people tell me, oh, there's a tutorial? And I'm like, well, you literally have to press a button that says skip tutorial. Oh, yeah, I just pressed that. What tutorial? I don't know what you're talking about. There's a book in the bottom right. I bet you there's people in chat right now that don't know that there's a little button that you can press in the bottom right of the chat that opens up like a tutorial with a bunch of information in it. Guarantee you a bunch of people in chat.
Yeah.
Also, it's flashing. You're
Legally
welcome.
flashing. It's every new character that shows up, and I have someone in chat tell me about it because I don't even notice it, which is just testament to how forgettable it is in the bottom of your screen. Like, why would, a lot of games have, like, your screen will go dark and it'll, like, point towards where it is. Even, like, shitty mobile games have that, where it's like, oh yeah, this thing is really important. Like, please look at it. But it's just like, no, we'll just make it every, 80 seconds, change one opacity. Like, that's it. It's like, cool, man. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like a lack of, it's not even like coddling a new player, but just like remote catering. There's just no real anything for the.
What was it? Sequelitis? I think it was Sequelitis by Eoraptor. One of the first points that he made was that in game design, it has to be natural that you learn how to play the game. That he always hated it when it's just like, hey, you need to do this exact thing, and this is the way that you do it. Let me put 800 words on the screen and explain.
Should be intuitive,
All right, this is how you do it. It should just be, oh yeah, I have to do this, and I learn intuitively. Yes.
Not the most.
But hopefully they
common
can
thing.
fix that in PoE too.
I feel like we could slap what Duck just said. We could really add on to everything we've said today. Any sort of gripe or complaint, it's just, and hopefully this will be fixed in Path 2.
Yep.
It almost feels like any podcast any of us are a part of in the future should really just have nothing to say but like objective builds we're playing, because everything else is kind of just chalked up to. And hopefully Path 2 will fix this, and hopefully this will
hard
change
mode.
in Path 2.
Hard mode will fix it. Don't worry.
Easily.
I'll be playing hard mode beta on Friday, basically, with the no vendors. Should be interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to not lose awareness of time. We've
It's
surprisingly already gone through. What? It's gone. It's gone.
The awareness of time is gone. It left us long ago.
That's pretty much in line with what we expected, though, when we discussed it.
Well, I think we actually covered most of the things that were on the podcast topic list, except maybe one or 2 points. But like everything naturally weaved together into sort of a conversation. I mean, an actual conversation, not just sort of a conversation. It was very enjoyable. But before we round things off, do you want to quickly tell us what we should still be excited to see from you? Lighty, do you have any news regarding whether you're doing a charity league this league still, or is there one next league? Or
I think unless they extend Expedition, which could happen because they're pushed a week late than normal, so either they're gonna end early, forever be pushed back a week, or extend 2-3 weeks, whatever. If they extend, we'll probably do another Able Gamers charity event. Otherwise, most likely I'll do it every other league with Jim, just because again it's kind of like I don't want oversaturation, even for charity. Like they could wait. They could wait another month. I don't really want oversaturation for events because it's just like it's too much. There's just too many things. I mean, at the moment, there's like 4 or 5 events that we do consistently for leagues, and it's just too much. So aside from that, it's pretty much just new episodes of All for One come out every Saturday.
How close are you?
How close am I to getting every unique in game?
Yeah.
Percentage wise, probably like 95 or 96%, something like that.
Time wise, probably 43%.
Time wise, it could be not even remotely close because there's things like replica bated breath, which is just unknown. Thankfully, I actually just got my lab jewels last league before 2 leagues ago before they changed it. I got all of them in hardcore solo self and swapped them over because now doing that is like impossible. There's just realistically no way to get lab jewels since they're just random drops. But yeah, we're in episode 119 of All for One, I think 120, something like that. So it continues on. One day TM.
One day. And BigDucks, what is still the plan for you for this league?
Currently, we are in like repair mode for all of our builds and all the builds that I've basically ever played. Since 3.15 kind of annihilated everything and put a wrench in the plans of essentially every build, we're just working through all of them. We're probably about halfway through the builds that I want to test. Doing a new kind of workshop sort of series on builds and such where I try to see how they work at different levels of gear. Go from like 1 Exalt, 5 Exalt, 10 Exalt, 20 Exalt, more than that, whatever that might end up being, seeing if they're worthwhile playing, and just basically doing house cleaning is all that I'm doing right now, because there's not really much else to do at the moment while we wait for the obvious glory that will be 3.16 and the best league we'll ever have, right, guys?
Fingers crossed.
Wait.
Yeah.
What? Is Call Me Goop, is that your housemate, or is that...
That's my girlfriend.
Oh, awesome. Can't get the milk frother because of the podcast. Okay, we're gonna end so you can have a cappuccino.
It's in the kitchen.
Right. Balor, you finished your Devs Off build. What's the current project? Is that an actual build now?
Yeah, an actual build. I'm going to spend like 200x or something putting together Winter Orb. There's a real build and have
Winter
some
Orb
fun.
Again. Oh, right.
I mean, it's the best skill in the game.
Fact, not objective.
That is
fact.
Yeah, no, that's just a fact. It's just mechanically the best skill in the game. Like,
Funny because I hate Winter Orb.
Well,
I mean, I'm on board with you hating it, but do you think there's a mechanically better skill, or do you hate it because it's too mechanically smooth and it doesn't have flaws except raw damage?
I have hated Winter Orb since day one. I don't like the way that it feels. It's a visceral thing for me. I know it's mechanically just overpowered as shit. I understand that. I hate the visceral feel of it. I don't like it.
See, that's fine.
Mechanically
That's like,
skill.
yeah, it's powerful, but I don't want to play it, which is fine.
I might say Arc, honestly, for me. Might be my favorite mechanically strong skill.
Yeah.
Arc with Valarc as like a kicker. That's auto targeting, map clearing, one button, full clear screen.
Arc feels good. I agree.
Scales with chains not done, so Awakened was good. I don't know. It's up there for me.
I'm okay with Arc.
Not Blade Vortex anymore.
Unfortunately.
My boys.
That's what we're testing right now is Poison Blade Vortex, and it still works pretty well. But
Yeah.
all other forms of Blade Vortex are kind of dead at this point. Is how it feels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see Poison still working. I can also see like a Poison Blade Blast still working, but probably ideally you
Blade
don't want to
Blast-
do Poison, but you want to do like Hierophant for big AoE overlaps or something like that.
Blade Blast AoE just doesn't overlap anymore. They annihilated the AoE on it. It's
You need Awakened AoE for it to come basically what it was before. And
yeah.
It's just
Yeah, but
It's
Hierophant
rough.
gives you like a shit ton of AoE based on your mana, right?
yeah, but also the
Yeah, but
cluster's
then
getting nerfed also.
And Archmage got nerfed, so it's kind of like it's just in a rough spot.
Fair enough.
With Poison Blade Vortex, you can clear with either pops or you can clear with Plague Bearer. So
True.
Very true. A lot of builds get
insane.
carried by Plague Bear. There's a lot of crutch skills at the moment. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, say like Hydrosphere is probably the most offensive of the crutch skills, but
That's
what
getting
goes on?
nerfed next league. I'm
It's on
calling
my
it.
hit list. I started writing my
Yeah.
my hit list for next league.
Yeah,
It's on there.
Hydrosphere is on the list. It does too much. It's Frostwall 2.0, and they're gonna nerf it.
Yeah, Sniper's Mark as well. I think is going to get big hit.
Mm-hmm.
Oof.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
better
Take away my
than
baby.
better than everything else by like a metric fuck ton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As for myself, I think I'm going to wait. Am I muted? You check. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
always
you're-
paranoid.
You're muted.
Yeah. You're muted. Yeah. No. As for myself, I mean, I saw it. I just went with the bait.
Okay.
As for myself, I'm currently putting a lot of time into making sure that we got podcasts lined up for the next couple of weeks, so that we can still entertain you guys, and get maybe a little bit of insight on different aspects of the game. I think with you being here, we really wanted to touch upon all the topics again, which I think we did a great job with, just to get different opinions once again from big softcore trade, big softcore solo cell phone, or solo cell phone all around. And I think the next couple episodes are going to be more themed into certain things, because we don't want to have the same state of 3.5 discussion every time. We're probably going to do, one podcast about builds, one podcast about, hopefully soon we already get information regarding the new announcement, and then we can talk about that sort of stuff. And then I'm also going to be doing more YouTube content. And I want to play a little bit of variety before the next league comes around. So
YouTube's where it's at.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm definitely planning to go big on the YouTubes in the next couple weeks. I've neglected it for too long. Podcast has done a great job at revitalizing the YouTube. Now it's time to deliver the helpful new player content, so we can get a lot of people into the game when the new league comes around.
When are you going to start playing Roblox and Quick Path?
Roblox?
That's where the money's at, dude.
That's the superior game. Roblox. RP Roblox servers.
Yep.
No. I've looked into a little bit of Minecraft. Friends of mine started a custom Minecraft server, and they really wanted me to play it a little bit. And I've always felt interested in it, but that's probably
Start a
a topic
series.
for outside of the...
Go make a Minecraft series.
Yeah, I thought about it. Honestly, why not? I mean, just for a little bit. I've never played it. I'd be able to deliver a unique point of view,
You will
Path
get
of
lost
Exile
in the
player.
sea of bajillions of people playing Minecraft. It's a cruel mistress.
Yeah, true. But yeah,
Yeah, boys.
thanks for coming onto the podcast. Thanks for the insightful discussions and sharing so much of your time with us. For those of you in chat, also, of course, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening for so long, and thanks for watching on the YouTubes or listening onto the the audio version of the podcast. If you've missed the beginning of the podcast, obviously this will be uploaded in full to YouTube and the everywhere where you can listen to podcasts, like Spotify and what are some of the other names? I always forget them.
Stitcher, that one.
Pocket Cast. There's so many funny little names. But that shall be it for this episode. We're gonna announce the next episode somewhere next week when I figured it all out. And until then, I wish you all a wonderful rest of your time. Have a beautiful weekend and enjoy some Path. Bye bye.
Later, boys.